Chapter 843 Entering the Ruin 3. Outside the assembly tent, Group 1 gathered. Michael stood before the four assigned to him. Ariane was already beside him, calm and composed atop her flame lion. The other three nobles stood a short distance away, watching him with varying degrees of curiosity. Michael did not waste time. "My name is Sir Mike," he said evenly. There was no arrogance in his tone and no attempt at dominance. Just simple clarity. "I assume you all have some idea of my abilities already, so I will not take your time repeating what you likely know." A few subtle glances were exchanged. Of course they knew. Everyone here knew. "However," Michael continued, "I would like a basic understanding of what each of you can do. The situation within the ruin is unknown to us. Coordination will increase our chances of survival and overall strength as a team." His gaze swept across them calmly. "If we understand each other's strengths, we can better use them once inside." There was no refusal and no one objected. The first to step forward was Ariane. "I am Ariane Evermoon," she said formally. "A beast tamer." Several of the others rolled their eyes subtly. Who did not know that? The daughter of Duke Evermoon. The most visible participant in this expedition. Was the flame lion beneath her not already enough information? Still, formalities were formalities. She gave a brief nod and stepped back. The next introduced himself as Lucien Harrowmont, a dual element. Mage specializing in wind and lightning manipulation. After him came Cedric Vale, a sword cultivator who specialized in close-range burst combat and defensive techniques. The last stepped forward with a faint smile. "Alaric Golden," he said smoothly. "From the Golden family. I am a fire mage." Michael's eyes flickered slightly. Golden family. The name was familiar. "I am also the elder brother of Syria Golden." There it was. Michael did not react outwardly, but internally he understood immediately. He had a good impression of Syria. Perhaps it was because, although she clearly carried the pride of a noble, she had been different from most nobles he had encountered. And now her elder brother stood before him. Why did he introduce himself like that? The reason was obvious. Alaric had used the connection the moment he spoke, an attempt at proximity, perhaps even favor. Michael met his gaze calmly. "I see," he replied simply. Alaric's smile widened just slightly. The message had been delivered. Whether it would matter inside the ruin was another matter entirely. Michael looked over the four of them once more. Aside from himself and Ariane, who were clearly the youngest in the group, the other three were noticeably older. Lucien, Cedric, and Alaric all carried the bearing of individuals who had trained for many years. Their physiques, their auras, even the faint lines of maturity at the corners of their eyes suggested they were approaching the upper limit of the ruin's age restriction. 27, 28, perhaps even 29. This was understandable. Power was not easily grasped. Even among nobles, advancement required time, resources, and relentless effort. The three assigned to him were talented in their own right. Otherwise, they would never have been selected for this expedition. But compared to Michael, their strength was lacking. He could sense it clearly. The density of their mana, the stability of their foundations. They were strong by the standards of their generation. They were weak by his. If he were honest, he did not need a team. None of them could truly assist him if he decided to move seriously. Inside the ruin, if danger beyond their level appeared, they would only slow him down. But there was also no need to be overly proactive. This was still a sanctioned expedition. Eyes were everywhere. If a team had been formed, then for now it would function as a team, at least on the surface. Michael's expression remained calm as he nodded once. "Good," he said. "We maintain formation once inside." There was a subtle shift in the air as Michael gave a slight show of authority. They all understood that, regardless of age, he was the strongest among them, so no one argued. Around the encampment, the other factions were preparing as well. Soon, the space around the portal was cleared completely. A wide ring formed around the shimmering gate, leaving only the selected groups from each faction standing within the boundary. Michael's group moved with the Lionheart representatives, taking their assigned position among the organized lines. From where he stood, he could see the other banners. Some groups had more mages. Others had heavy fighters. A few had strange, unfamiliar beasts resting near their feet, their eyes fixed on the portal. Then the air shifted. A figure stepped forward near the portal's edge. A strong man. His presence was on the same level as Princess Priscilla. The murmurs around the portal faded without anyone needing to shout. The man's gaze swept across the assembled groups. His voice followed, deep and steady. It is time. Entry begins now. The first to enter will be the Black Serpent Empire. All other factions will follow in the agreed order. Do not crowd the gate. Do not waste time. Once inside, you move. If you do not want your group to be separated upon entry, make sure there is some form of contact between you as you enter at once. A ripple passed through the Imperial side. Michael watched quietly as Prince Rue stepped forward. 9 people followed behind him. Clean, disciplined formation. Rue and his attendant were the youngest among them, but only now did Michael truly pay attention to the group surrounding him. Including the attendant who had been watching him earlier, the other 8 were all rank 2. Every single one. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. So that was their spearhead. No wonder the Empire acted like it owned the sky. Compared to the scattered strength of the smaller kingdoms, Rue's group looked like a blade. Not just sharp, well-forged. They were probably the strongest group gathered here if one ignored individual strength alone. The strongman raised his hand once, and the portal's unstable glow steadied for a brief moment, as if responding to his will. Please enter. Chapter 844 Entering the Ruin 4. 5 minutes passed after the Empire entered. Then the strongman's voice rang out again. Lionheart Kingdom. Second. Michael's eyebrow rose slightly. He did not know how the order had been arranged. If he had known, he would have realized earlier that this was one of those silent privileges that came with being the kingdom that discovered the ruin. Though it was uncertain whether this could truly be called a benefit. Being second meant earlier access. Earlier access also meant first contact with whatever dangers were inside. A double-edged gift. The Lionheart group shifted. The 15 nobles formed up as they had been instructed. 3 lines. 3 teams. 5 people each. The strong man lifted his hand again. Remember what I said, he called, voice steady. If you do not want your group to be separated upon entry, keep contact as you enter. Do not leave gaps. Then the 10th prince moved. Group 2 went first. Then they vanished. A short pause followed. Barely a breath. Then the signal came again. Group 1. Michael moved immediately. Arian guided her flame lion forward, closing in beside him. Lucian, Cedric, and Alaric tightened their spacing without needing to be told. Michael did not speak. He simply extended his mana outward. A thin, invisible tether, light as silk, wrapped around their presence. Arian felt it first. Her posture tightened subtly as the connection brushed her senses. Lucian blinked once, then steadied. Cedric's hand went to his sword hilt out of instinct, then relaxed. Alaric's gaze sharpened, a faint flicker of surprise passing behind his smile. Michael stepped up to the portal. The green light reflected in his eyes. For a brief moment, he could feel the ruin's boundary resisting him. Then he walked through. The world folded. Sound vanished. Space twisted. His mana tether stretched, holding the others close. Then the light took them all. The clearing outside disappeared. Deep within the ruin, far from the eyes of those who had just entered, another scene unfolded. A grand structure of stone sat at the center of a silent basin. It did not look like something built by human hands. Its walls rose like jagged cliffs, layered and uneven. Pillars were fused into the frame rather than placed, and the ceilings arched in natural ribs, like the inside of a petrified beast. Veins of pale crystal ran through the stone, pulsing faintly with dim light that did not warm the air. Everything about the place felt ancient. Inside the building, there was no wind, yet the air moved. A crawling chill slid across the floors like something alive. In the darkness above the central hall, a sound echoed. It resembled laughter, but not the laughter of a person. It was the kind of sound one might hear in a nightmare and wake up drenched in sweat. The sound rolled through the stone hall, struck the pillars, and returned as a distorted chorus. Then a voice followed. Finally, it whispered, "After hundreds of years, I can finally leave this place." The faint crystal veins brightened for a moment. The voice breathed again, and the darkness seemed to shift. "He truly thought he was clever," the voice continued, almost amused. "He believed his precious tamed beasts would outlive me." A low, bitter chuckle spread through the hall. As if they could. There was a pause. Then the tone changed, a quiet acknowledgement layered over the mockery. "But I will admit it. That bastard was smart." The crystals dimmed slightly. He knew that if none of his precious beasts survived, this place would collapse on its own if that ever happened. The voice exhaled. That was the intention. Irritation seeped into its tone. But what he did not expect was for it to become a spatial realm. The words carried heavy resentment. The voice fell silent for a moment, then spoke again, lower, almost depressed. "Even after I took control, I could not leave." The crystals flickered faintly, unevenly. "It is ironic. This is the only place my soul can endure without a body after so long." Pause followed. Then the voice hardened. "Yet it is also a cage." The darkness rippled, and the hall seemed to tighten. "Fortunately," the voice said, and for the first time there was something like satisfaction in it, "someone stumbled upon the runes." A faint tremor ran through the stone floor. "Through that crack, I tasted the outside world again." The voice sounded almost hungry now. But the body that came was too old. Disgust colored the words. "Wasted flesh. A decaying vessel. I did not like it." Another pause. The presence within the hall shifted. The earlier resentment faded, replaced by something colder. It had waited. For centuries it endured in silence, conserving what little power its fractured soul still possessed. When opportunity finally came, it did not seize it recklessly. It adapted and disguised the forgotten battlefield. A treasure site, a temptation. It allowed rumors to spread through the cracks of the world. Permitted scholars to discover fragments of ancient markings. Then it allowed the realm to be forcefully opened. Kingdoms poured their resources into stabilizing the gate. They believed they were exploiting an opportunity. In truth, they were feeding the cage. The entity had imposed only one true restriction upon the realm. Age? Under 30. That condition was not random. It was deliberate. Young bodies carried vitality, flexible foundations, untapped potential, souls not yet worn thin by decades of use. They were easier to overwrite, easier to mold, easier to consume without immediate rejection. The entity had no intention of claiming a decaying vessel. It required something strong, something refined, something that could endure the weight of its existence without collapsing. And beyond the body, there was something else it required. Nourishment. A faint laugh echoed once more before fading completely. Silence returned. But it was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of anticipation. The grand stone structure stood unmoving, its walls as natural as any mountain cliff. The towering pillars cast long shadows across the central chamber. The ceiling arched high overhead, lined with veins of pale crystal that pulsed in slow, measured intervals. Like breath, like a heartbeat. Chapter 845. Entering the Ruin 5. Michael felt ground beneath his boots again. The twisting sensation stopped abruptly, leaving a brief moment of weightlessness before gravity settled into place. Darkness surrounded them. Not absolute darkness. A deep, endless twilight. The world they stepped into was vast and open, yet there was no visible sky. Instead, an immense black canopy stretched overhead like a ceiling lost in shadow. Faint currents of pale light moved across it like distant, silent storms. Then the crystals began to glow, softly at first. Scattered across the terrain were clusters of crystalline growths that pulsed with dim blue and violet light. They rose from the ground like strange, transparent plants, some shaped like jagged grass blades, others like crooked trees made of glass. The ground beneath their feet was not soil. It was dark stone, smooth in some places and cracked in others. Thin lines of luminous crystal ran through those cracks, forming glowing veins across the surface, like a vast network of frozen lightning embedded in the earth. The light from those veins illuminated the area in a low, dreamlike haze. Arian's flame lion exhaled slowly, its golden mane reflecting the crystal glow in fractured colors. The beast's presence cast warm light that contrasted with the cold radiance of the terrain. Lucian and Alaric turned slowly in place, eyes widening slightly. Cedric's hand returned to his sword hilt, not out of panic, but instinct. Michael did not move immediately. He released a small portion of his perception outward. The terrain stretched into uneven ridges and shallow depressions. In the distance, crystal outcroppings rose in clusters, casting long, distorted shadows across the stone plains. It was eerie and beautiful. The crystals did not shine harshly. They glowed like stars fallen to the ground, painting the world in shifting hues of indigo and silver. Every step caused reflections to ripple across the surface beneath them. Michael glanced upward again. So this is the ruin. Arian guided her lion a step forward. The beast's claws scraped against crystal-veined stone, producing a faint ringing sound that echoed farther than expected. Lucian crouched briefly, touching one of the glowing lines running through the ground. Cedric scanned the horizon. Alaric narrowed his eyes toward a distant ridge where the crystals seemed denser. Despite the silence, there was a strange harmony to the place, a quiet symmetry. Michael's instincts did not relax. After all, this had once been the domain of a rank 4 supernatural. Only the heavens knew what it truly contained. Michael's gaze swept across the vast crystal-lit landscape again, his mind steady but alert. Perhaps he was being overly cautious. Every rank 4 existence he had encountered so far had left a deep impression on him, and none of those impressions had been pleasant. Still, caution here would not harm him, so he did not suppress it. He let his senses stretch a little farther, and what he saw left him in awe. Life truly was amazing. At rank 1, the world had already felt vast to him. His senses had sharpened. His body had grown lighter. Every advancement back then had felt like a leap into something extraordinary. Rank 2 had only deepened that feeling. Yet standing here now, within what had once been the territory of a rank 4 existence, he could not help but feel that rank 4 was something entirely different from rank 3. Not just stronger, different. Of course, that was obvious. But perhaps his thoughts were influenced by how smooth rank 3 had been for him. He had not struggled the way others did. The bottlenecks that trapped most people had felt like shallow steps in his path that might have skewed his perception. Rank 4, however, felt like a threshold that truly divided worlds. He was not surprised by how vast this realm was. He had once stepped into a rank 4 domain before. Even when suppressed, it had been immense. That alone told him how much deeper the foundation of such beings ran. And this place was not an active domain. It was a remnant realm left behind for dozens, perhaps hundreds of years, unsupervised, developing naturally, absorbing ambient energy, stabilizing, expanding. It would have been strange if it were small. Michael let his gaze sweep across the horizon one final time before speaking. "Stay alert, everyone," he said calmly. "This is unknown territory." No one argued. They began advancing in formation. The crystal veins beneath their feet pulsed faintly as they moved. Michael extended his perception quietly. To avoid attracting unnecessary trouble, he condensed it to roughly 200 meters. Around him, as they continued forward, something shifted beneath one of the crystal ridges ahead. Michael felt it immediately. A fluctuation. "HM seems to have lower energy too," he thought. He did not speak. Instead, he chose not to intervene. He wanted to see the capabilities of his teammates. From the energy level, this thing was manageable. To understand them better, it was better to observe how they reacted in real combat. A faint distortion rippled across the ground ahead. The stone cracked. A black mass peeled itself from the surface like tar separating from rock. It stood upright in a single fluid motion. Faceless. Humanoid in outline but wrong in proportion. Its limbs were slightly too long. Its torso too narrow. Its head smooth and round without eyes, nose, or mouth. No mana signature leaked from it in the normal sense. Instead, its energy clung tightly to its form, compact and dense. Cedric reacted instantly. He charged forward. His sword left its sheath in a clean arc. The black figure lunged without sound. Its speed was not extraordinary, but its movement was unervingly smooth. Cedric's blade cut downward. The strike was precise. Steel met shadow. Instead of resistance, the sword sank halfway into the creature's shoulder. There was no blood, no sound. The faceless head tilted slightly. Then its elongated arm snapped forward. Chapter 846 Orb. Cedric twisted at the waist just as the elongated arm shot toward his chest. The black limb grazed past him, tearing through the air with unnatural silence. A thin streak of darkness brushed his shoulder guard, leaving behind a faint smear that hissed before fading. He did not retreat. Instead, he stepped in. Mana surged along his blade. The steel vibrated with a low hum as he shifted his stance, abandoning the wide, flashy arcs from before and tightening his movement. The creature's arm retracted like elastic snapping back into place. Cedric's sword flashed again. This time, the strike was horizontal. The blade cut cleanly through the faceless neck. For a brief instant, there was resistance, as if slicing through compressed mist. Then the head separated. It spun once in the air and fell to the ground with a dull thud. The body remained standing, unmoving, headless, but no blood poured out. Cedric stepped back, chest rising slightly from exertion. A moment passed, and the body finally fell. Cedric slowly turned to look at Michael with expectation. There was a trace of pride in his eyes. He had reacted quickly and finished the enemy decisively. He expected at least a nod or some sign of acknowledgement. Instead, he met a calm, unreadable face. Michael's expression did not change. That puzzled Cedric. He did not feel his performance had been bad. And in truth, it was not. However, to Michael it had looked flashy. Clean but lacking essence. It disappointed him slightly. He knew Ren was special. Even Michael himself had not fully comprehended weapon chi yet. But he had expected at least a noble son trained for decades to show a deeper grasp of the sword. Michael said nothing. Instead, his gaze remained fixed on the headless body. Ariane's voice broke the silence. "What could it be?" she asked quietly. "Is it a monster of this realm or just one of the monsters in this realm?" The question hung in the air. For a heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the body began to move. The headless torso trembled. The surface cracked like drying clay. Before anyone could respond to Ariane's question, the entire black form dissolved into a thin mist of dark gas. The severed head followed. The gas swirled briefly in place. Then it condensed, compressed. Darkness folded inward on itself. A deep blue orb formed where the creature had stood. It hovered slightly above the ground. Its surface was smooth, and it glowed faintly. From it emanated a subtle hunger that was not directed at anyone but was felt by those nearby. Lucien's breathing shifted. Alaric's pupils narrowed. Even Cedric felt the faint pull in his chest, but no one stepped forward to reach for it. Michael's eyes sharpened slightly. Now that was interesting. Cedric swallowed. "What do we do with it?" he asked, eyes fixed on the hovering orb. Lucien stepped closer, though not too close. "It could be either a reward or a trap," he said thoughtfully. Alaric folded his arms loosely, studying the blue glow. "In ruins like this, things are rarely neutral. It is either a good thing or a very bad one." Ariane remained atop her flame lion, gaze steady. "But that hunger," she murmured. What she did not say was that she was not the only one who could feel it. Even her tamed beast felt the same, though for some reason, the hunger was less intense for it. All of them turned toward Michael. He still did not speak. His green eyes glowed faintly, brighter than usual, reflecting the deep blue light of the orb. For a brief second, something within his pupils seemed to shift, as though layers of information were unfolding behind them, yet his face remained expressionless. No approval, no warning, just silence. Cedric's jaw tightened slightly. He had been the one to defeat the creature. If this was a reward, then it should rightfully be his. And if it was dangerous, then was he supposed to simply ignore it? The faint sense of hunger brushed against him again. Greed flickered in his eyes. Before anyone could stop him, Cedric stepped forward and grabbed the orb. The moment his fingers touched it, the blue light flared. Energy surged into him like a torrent, cold and dense yet pure. Cedric's eyes widened as the orb dissolved into streaks of light that poured through his arm and into his chest. His mana swelled violently. The crystal veins beneath their feet flickered in response. Cedric staggered half a step, then steadied. He inhaled sharply. Power coursed through his meridians, filling spaces that had felt slightly hollow before. His limbs felt lighter. His senses sharpened. Even the grip on his sword felt more solid. A slow smile spread across his face. "I feel stronger," he said, disbelief and excitement mixing in his tone. Lucien's eyes lit up immediately. Alaric's composure cracked for the first time, genuine interest flashing across his features. "So it enhances cultivation," Lucien said eagerly. "Or at least refines it," Alaric added, his gaze sharpening. Ariane studied Cedric carefully. "Your aura is denser," she observed, quietly. Excitement spread through the group like a spark catching dry grass. If every creature here produced something like that, then this ruin was not merely an inheritance site. It was a field of resources. Only Michael did not react. His eyes dimmed back to normal, but internally his thoughts were anything but calm. When Cedric had absorbed the orb, Michael's eyes of truth had pierced through the blue glow and into its core. What he saw had not been pure energy. It had been faces, countless faint, overlapping faces pressed against the inner surface of the orb. They were blurred and distorted, as if submerged in deep water. Some looked human, some did not. Their expressions were stretched, their mouths open in silent screams he could not hear. They had not been clear enough for him to identify, but they had been there. And when the orb dissolved into Cedric's body, those faces had not simply vanished. Chapter 847 Faces. For a brief moment, as the energy spread through Cedric's meridians, Michael saw something else. Tiny impressions. Small, faint faces blooming beneath Cedric's skin. Along his arm, across his chest, around his neck. They were subtle, almost translucent. No one else reacted. There was no sign that anyone else could see them. Michael was not surprised. Not everyone possessed his means. Still, the sight alarmed him. The faces did not move. They did not struggle. They simply existed. Then, slowly, they faded from obvious sight, sinking deeper into Cedric's body until they were barely perceptible, even to him. Cedric laughed softly, rolling his shoulders as if testing his newfound strength. The others were already imagining what it would mean if they could gather dozens of such orbs. Michael said nothing. He did not rebuke Cedric. He did not warn the others. Instead, his voice flowed silently through mana. Private transmission. It reached only one person. Ariane. Do not absorb them if you can help it. His tone was calm and steady, without panic. If you choose to, that is your decision. But be cautious. Ariane stiffened slightly atop her flame lion. She did not turn to look at him. Her expression did not change, but her thoughts sharpened. She knew Michael was strong and surely had his own secrets and mysterious means. She found herself wanting to ask Michael what he saw but could not bring herself to do so. In the end, she kept her words to herself and made her decision. Michael had no idea what Ariane was thinking. He had only felt the need to tell her about the situation because of the relationship they shared. He had no control over her actions and did not want to. As for why he said nothing to the nobles, aside from not wanting to reveal too much about himself, Michael did not believe they would heed his words. From Cedric's actions, that much was obvious. Michael let the moment pass. The excitement in the air was sharp, almost tangible. Lucien's eyes kept flicking from Cedric's aura to the surrounding terrain, as if the world had suddenly turned into a field of hidden prizes. Alaric's calm mask returned, but the greed behind it did not disappear. Michael did not indulge the mood. He gave a single, quiet instruction, firm enough to cut through the rising noise. Keep moving. No one objected, not with the way his presence pressed down on the group whenever he chose to let it show. They reformed their spacing and advanced again, boots and claws scraping against crystal-veined stone. The low glow beneath their feet pulsed faintly with each step. They had not gone far when something caught the light ahead. It was small at first, just a concentrated patch of glow among the darker ridges. Then the terrain dipped slightly and the source came into view. A flower. It did not belong in any normal sense. Its stem rose from a crack in the black stone, as though it had sprouted directly from the crystal veins. The petals were thin and layered, translucent like polished glass, and each one carried a soft inner luminescence that shifted between pale blue and faint violet. The air around it carried a faint, clean scent, like cold rain and crushed herbs. Even without understanding what it was, the group could tell it was valuable. Anything that shone like that inside a realm like this was not common. Lucien took a step toward it instinctively, then stopped, catching himself. Cedric's hand tightened around his sword hilt again. Alaric's gaze sharpened, measuring the distance, the surroundings, the angles, already deciding the quickest way to harvest it without damage. Michael did not rush. His eyes flicked over the area once. Then he reached into his robe and pulled out a pouch. It was not a normal pouch. It looked plain, made from dark cloth reinforced with leather strips, but the mouth held something unusual. The inside was deeper than it should have been. It was a spatial container. Michael handed it over without ceremony. This was not his personal storage. It was an item issued before entry, reserved for team leaders and expedition captains. A space-type container meant for gathering within the ruin, precious enough that most nobles in Lionheart had never even held one. Within the kingdom, items like this were rare, hoarded by high houses, the royal treasury, and a handful of teachers within the academy. Bringing it into the ruin at all was an expense that spoke of how seriously Lionheart was taking this inheritance. The condition attached to it was just as clear as the object's value. 20% of whatever went inside upon exit belonged to the kingdom. It was not a negotiation. It was the price of being allowed to take the remaining 80% out with them. The pouch was not small either. Inside it, several empty boxes had already been arranged, prepared specifically for fragile herbs and unknown materials that could not be thrown together carelessly. Whoever had issued it had done so with experience, expecting the teams to find more than simple stones. Arian watched the pouch for half a second, then shifted her focus back to the glowing flower. She did not reach for it with bare hands. Her movements were controlled and careful, as if she had harvested rare beast herbs before. Even her flame lion held still, its breath low and hot, keeping its warmth away from the delicate glow. The flower was cut cleanly. The moment it left the ground, the glow around its stem intensified, briefly, then stabilized again. It was placed into one of the prepared boxes, and the box slid into the pouch without resistance. The opening did not bulge. The pouch did not change shape. It simply swallowed the item. The group's mood brightened again, but this time it was more grounded excitement. Less reckless than after the orb. More practical. Michael watched the pouch close, then resumed scanning the terrain. He did not comment on the flower or the orb. He only kept walking, eyes steady, expression unreadable, his senses spread outward like a net. The ruin was generous. That alone made him uneasy. He remembered what an instructor back at the academy had once told him about situations like this. A supernatural situation that gave so easily was usually taking something in return. Chapter 848 Eerie Discovery. The next 5 hours passed in a steady rhythm of movement, battle, and discovery. The ruin did not remain silent. Shadows continued to emerge again and again. The first humanoid form had only been the beginning. Not all of them shared the same shape. The only constant was their color, black, and faces with no features. Just smooth, empty surfaces where expressions should have been. The group adapted quickly. Michael moved less often, but when he did, the tide shifted immediately. Stronger shadows appeared as they ventured deeper. Larger, denser, their energy more compact and oppressive. In those moments, Michael stepped in. Sometimes he intercepted a strike that would have forced one of the others into a dangerous exchange. Sometimes he dismantled a creature with a single precise action, leaving the rest of the body to collapse harmlessly. Other times he allowed the others to push to their limit before assisting, ensuring none were overwhelmed. Through it all, the orbs continued to appear, deep blue and faintly glowing, carrying that same subtle hunger. This time, the distribution was more measured. Even Arian gained some. The difference lay in what they did next. Unlike the first encounter, not all of them grabbed the orbs the instant they formed. They discovered something by accident. When one orb remained untouched for several minutes, the sphere hardened. The deep blue light condensed inward, solidifying into a crystal-like object no larger than a fist. It became an item that could be stored and absorbed later. That realization shifted Michael's approach, making him collect a few himself, but just like Arian, he only kept them and did not attempt to absorb them. When he personally dismantled a stronger shadow or assisted in finishing one that threatened to escalate beyond control, the resulting orb belonged to him by right of contribution. He did not touch it immediately. Only when it hardened into a stable object did he store it. He had no intention of absorbing something he did not fully understand. As the hours passed, they gathered more than just orbs. Several luminous herbs similar to the first flower were harvested from crystal fissures. The spatial container slowly filled. 20% would belong to the kingdom upon exit. The rest would be theirs. Yet despite the steady gain, Michael's unease did not fade. The ruin was generous. Too generous. The faceless creatures appeared frequently, but rarely in overwhelming numbers. The treasures were not hidden behind impossible trials. The orbs strengthened cultivation in measurable ways. It felt almost curated, as if something within the realm was encouraging growth. Michael extended his perception again as they paused atop a low ridge, scanning the crystal-lit expanse stretching into endless twilight. Asterisk. Elsewhere within the ruin, beneath the same endless twilight canopy, was Group 2. The 10th prince of the Lionheart Kingdom stood at its center. Around him, the crystal-veined ground was stained darker than before. Bodies lay scattered across the stone, not of faceless shadows, but of men. Their attire, now smeared with blood and dust, marked them clearly as belonging to a neighboring kingdom. Their eyes were open, unmoving. Ren stood a short distance away, sword resting loosely at his side. His expression was cold. He did not speak, but the air around him had shifted. The current situation had begun due to a conflict over a single herb, growing from a narrow fissure in the stone. A precious one, judging from the density of energy around it. Words had been exchanged. Tension had risen. The 10th prince had not hesitated. Instead of driving them back with force and superiority, instead of displaying dominance and allowing retreat, he had chosen the simplest path. He killed them. Ren. Gaze lingered. The fallen. He looked more displeased than shocked. The prince noticed. A scoff escaped him. His posture remained relaxed, his weapon still faintly humming with residual energy from the earlier clash. His expression carried faint disdain, as though Ren's silent judgment amused him. To the prince, weakness invited loss. If the opposing kingdom's team was too fragile to stand their ground, then they should not have contested ownership in the first place. Ren's fingers tightened slightly around the hilt of his sword. He had not intervened. The prince was stronger, and the exchange had been swift. But that did not mean he approved. The tension between them thickened, subtle but unmistakable. Other members of the group shifted uneasily, sensing the divide forming between noble authority and personal conviction. Before the silence could harden into something harsher, one of their teammates stepped back suddenly. "Look!" All eyes turned. The fallen bodies were changing. At first it seemed like a trick of the crystal light. Then the air above. Each corpse shimmered faintly. Dark mist began to seep from their chests. It was not blood, but the same black vapor they had seen when faceless creatures dissolved. It gathered slowly, rising like smoke drawn upward by unseen currents. Ren's eyes narrowed. The prince's expression shifted from mild irritation to focused interest. The mist above the first corpse condensed, compressed, and folded inward. A deep blue orb formed in the air above the dead soldier's body. Then another, and another. Every fallen opponent produced one. They hovered in place, glowing faintly, carrying that same subtle hunger the ruin's shadows had emitted. The group fell silent. This was new. These men had not been faceless creatures of the realm. They had been human, from another kingdom. No one moved closer to the orbs for a while. It was a distinct feeling, from how they had behaved before toward the orbs. The only thing they could feel now was a chill in their spines. It was not until the prince spoke that the silence broke. "This should be different from the faceless monsters. These people came from outside like us, so why are they producing these orbs too?" The prince paused for a few seconds as all eyes focused on him before he continued. "I am not sure, but I believe these orbs exist because they belong to the faceless monsters these people killed and absorbed their energy. Now that they are dead, their energy is returning to the ruin." Chapter 849 Pattern. No one spoke for a while until one of their teammates, Shaquille, raised his hand. "If that's the case, doesn't that mean this expedition just got more dangerous?" The prince's eyes flickered slightly. "Explain yourself," he said. "Yes, my prince," Shaquille replied. "What I am trying to say is, what happens when all these monsters are killed? Wouldn't that mean people would be the next things hunted?" As realization settled over everyone, it was followed by a strong chill running down their spines. In other locations within the ruin, many other groups were also discovering several strange things about it. Unfortunately, the advantages toward their growth were too significant to ignore. Asterisk. The crystal-lit ridge beneath Michael's boots trembled. A heavy force struck somewhere below, followed by the sharp crack of splitting stone. Michael turned his head slightly. "There," Arian murmured. They descended the ridge just enough to gain a clear view of the battlefield. The creature stood nearly twice the height of an average human. It was not humanoid. Not entirely. Its limbs were elongated, jointed at unnatural angles. The surface of its body was matte black, but unlike the lesser shadows, faint lines of dark blue energy pulsed beneath its skin, tracing patterns like veins. Its head was smooth and featureless, yet pressure radiated from where eyes should have been. Cedric was already in motion. He dashed forward, boots grinding against crystal-veined stone. His blade, now infused with mana, shimmered faintly with deep blue light. He struck first. The sword cleaved downward in a heavy arc. The blade met resistance. The faceless monster raised one elongated arm and caught the strike mid-swing. The impact detonated a shockwave that fractured the ground. Beneath them, Cedric's teeth clenched. The creature did not stagger. Instead, the lines beneath its surface flared brighter. Lucian moved. His hand swept outward, and the air responded instantly. A compressed blade of wind formed, almost invisible except for the distortion it carved through the space in front of him. It sliced forward in a crescent arc and struck the creature's flank. The wind edge tore a shallow line across the matte surface, sending dark fragments scattering like splintered stone. At the same time, Lucian's other hand traced a quick sigil in the air. Mana threads tightened around the monster's legs, attempting to bind and restrict its movement. Alaric did not hesitate. He stepped forward, planting his foot heavily as heat surged around him. Unlike Lucian's clean cuts, Alaric's fire magic roared outward in controlled aggression. A ring of burning sigils flared beneath his boots. From that ring, 3 pillars of flame erupted simultaneously around the monster, forming a triangular prison. The air distorted from sheer heat. The creature reacted violently. Its limbs slammed outward. One elongated arm extended like a whip, smashing into Cedric's side. Cedric twisted at the last instant, but the blow still sent him skidding across stone, boots carving deep lines as he fought to regain footing. The monster leapt upward. The mana bindings around its legs snapped with a violent ripple. It slammed into one of Alaric's fire pillars and tore through it, flames scattering outward in blazing fragments. Alaric gritted his teeth, pushing more mana into the formation. The sigils beneath him brightened, veins standing out along his neck. Lucian adjusted instantly. Instead of another cutting arc, he extended both palms forward. The air compressed sharply around the creature. Pressure. Invisible force tightened from all sides, restricting its range of motion. The monster's dark blue veins flared in response, resisting the pressure. Cedric charged again. He struck in rapid succession, short and precise blows aimed at joints and fracture points. A deep crack formed along one elongated limb. Lucian saw it. His fingers snapped. A concentrated spear of compressed wind shot forward and pierced directly into the fracture Cedric had created. The impact drove the crack deeper. The creature retaliated instantly. Its other arm elongated unnaturally, splitting at the elbow into 2 thinner appendages that stabbed downward. Cedric barely deflected one. The second pierced through his shoulder guard, grazing flesh. Blood sprayed. Lucian redirected the pressure field, forcing the creature's upper body backward to reduce the follow-up strike. Alaric compressed his flame pillars inward, narrowing the prison. The combined assault forced the creature backward. A wave of compact dark energy exploded outward. The wind bindings shattered. The fire pillars collapsed. Cedric dropped to one knee. Lucian was thrown several meters back, boots scraping as he fought. To regain balance, Alaric slid back, his sigils flickering violently before stabilizing. The monster stood in the center of scorched and fractured terrain. The fractures along its limbs sealed slowly, dark blue energy knitting. The damage together. From the ridge above, Ariane narrowed her eyes. It's healing. Michael's gaze sharpened. Cedric rose again. This time he did not rush. Lucian shifted left, drawing wind into a tighter orbit around his body. The air around him became sharp and thin, slicing at loose debris. Without visible motion, Alaric repositioned to the right, forming a more complex fire array. Beneath his feet, the second phase began. Cedric feinted high. The monster raised its arm. Lucian struck low, sending a horizontal blade of compressed wind toward its legs while simultaneously tightening a pressure field around its torso. Alaric condensed his fire into a single focused spear above him, rotating slowly. The creature moved to intercept Cedric. That was the opening. Alaric thrust both hands upward. The spear descended, focused. It pierced directly through the fracture Cedric and Lucian had, deepened. For a brief moment, there was resistance. Then the spear punched through the creature's upper torso, erupting out its back in a burst of blazing fire. Lucian followed instantly. He compressed the surrounding air into a narrow spike and drove it through the same wound, preventing the dark energy from sealing. The damage. The monster convulsed. Dark energy flared violently. Cedric stepped in. One final strike. His blade carved horizontally. The creature split. Its form collapsed inward, black vapor erupting outward before, compressing violently and dissolving entirely. Silence followed. The air shimmered with residual heat and thin slicing currents of fading wind. Cedric stood breathing heavily, blood trickling down his arm. Lucian lowered his hands slowly, the sharp tension in the air dissipating. Alaric's sigils dimmed. Above the scorched stone, A deep blue orb condensed. Larger than usual. Denser. Pulsed once. From the ridge, Arian spoke quietly. They are becoming stronger. Michael's eyes did not leave the orb. Yes, and it seems the pattern is that the deeper we go, the more intense everything becomes. Chapter 850A Location. Michael had not been wrong. Over the next 2 days, the ruin revealed even stranger facets of itself. The rhythm of exploration deepened and battles grew more complex. The faceless creatures did not simply increase in number or density. They evolved in variety. Some wielded elemental magic crudely, while others displayed regenerative traits, sealing fractures unless destroyed in a single decisive strike. The deeper the groups advanced, the more structured the resistance felt. Yet it was not only danger that escalated. The rewards diversified. Beyond the cultivation orbs, another phenomenon began to appear. After the fall of certain stronger faceless entities, the condensed energy did not always stabilize into a uniform deep blue sphere. Instead, some orbs shimmered with layered light within. Rather than smooth and dense, their interiors contained faint geometric patterns, almost like inscriptions suspended in liquid crystal. Thin lines of light rotated within them, forming incomplete symbols that rearranged continuously before settling. Unlike the cultivation orbs that took time to solidify, these orbs appeared already formed. Michael termed them skill orbs. A skill orb was fundamentally distinct from a cultivation orb. Where a cultivation orb contained energy designed to refine and strengthen existing foundations, a skill orb carried structured information embedded within it. It could be used a total of 3 times before being destroyed. When absorbed, a skill orb did not flood the body with brute force. Instead, it imprinted. The structured energy within unraveled into conceptual fragments, embedding itself into the recipient. The result was not an explosion of raw strength, but understanding. Pattern. A framework that settled into the mind and body as if it had always belonged there. Sometimes the change was immediate and obvious. For example, one of the earlier skill orbs they secured had originated from a faceless creature that compressed its limbs before striking, releasing bursts of force in short, violent pulses. When that orb was absorbed, the recipient did not simply gain more power. Instead, they instinctively understood how to condense mana into a single point within the body, hold it for a fraction of a second, and release it in a focused burst. The result was a technique that allowed short-range explosive movement. Not faster in general, but devastating in short exchanges. A step that covered only a few meters, yet carried the weight of a full body strike behind it. Another orb came from a regenerative faceless. It yielded a minor recovery technique that accelerated natural healing by stimulating cellular energy through controlled mana cycling. A creature that manipulated elemental energy crudely might leave behind an orb that granted access to a simplified elemental discharge. Not mastery, but the blueprint for it. What made skill orbs dangerous was not just their usefulness. It was the fact that they bypassed the years normally required to conceptualize a technique. They inserted it whole. Understanding without struggle. Mastery without trial. Faceless monsters that displayed unique behaviors in battle were the most likely to yield such orbs. Within 2 days, several skill orbs were secured. Not all were absorbed immediately. Michael observed each one carefully before allowing anyone to decide. The spatial container grew heavier, now holding not only energy crystals and rare herbs but crystallized skills waiting to be claimed. There were also strange raw materials stored. They did not know their use or name, but that did not stop them from recognizing and storing treasure. Group 2 experienced similar developments. After the incident with the fallen men and the realization that even human deaths produced orbs, their vigilance increased sharply. The tension between the 10th Prince and Ren did not disappear, but it became quieter and colder. They too encountered faceless that yielded more than raw cultivation refinement. However, something was wrong with Group 2. It was subtle at first, easy to miss. Yet as hours turned into a day, and then another, a pattern became impossible to ignore. Aside from the Prince and Ren, the others carried a faintly absent look in their eyes. They still moved. They still fought. They still reacted when danger appeared. But there were moments, increasing in frequency, when all three of them would slow at the same time and stare toward the same direction, as if their attention had been hooked. And dragged there, they would simply stare. The only difference between the prince and Ren and the rest of the team was simple. The other three had been absorbing cultivation orbs. The prince and Ren had not. Ren's reason was not fear. It was discipline. He belonged to the kind of path that refused shortcuts. The kind that treated external resources as crutches. He followed the belief that if a sword was not sharpened by pure effort, then its edge would never become real. Little resources, no reckless consumption, no unknown treasures poured into his foundation. Only steady refinement. Only swordsmanship pushed forward until it became instinct. The prince's reason was colder. He did not trust the ruin. And he did not trust rewards that arrived too easily. He had seen too many inheritances that gave sweetness first and poison later, so he did what princes did best. He waited and used the other three as his experiments, keeping his face calm while allowing them to consume the orbs and gain strength under the illusion that he would follow soon, all while watching their reactions. And while they fought, he collected more. He gathered them steadily, letting them harden into stable objects, before storing them away. He had told himself he would use them later, but looking at the current situation, the 10th prince was quite happy he had not used the orbs yet. Ren's restraint finally broke. "You warned them," he said, voice low but cutting. "I warned them. Those orbs were too convenient. And now look at them." His gaze shifted toward the three men who stood a short distance away, eyes fixed on the same distant stretch of crystal-lit terrain. "They're not right." The 10th prince did not look at him. "You speak as though I forced them," he replied calmly. "You allowed it. I allowed them to grow stronger. There is a difference." Ren's jaw tightened. Strength without clarity is a liability. The prince finally glanced at him, faint irritation surfacing. "Your path rejects external resources. That is your choice. Do not impose it on others." Ren did not back down. "This isn't about philosophy. It's about control. They're losing it." The prince's expression cooled further. "You overestimate the danger." Ren turned fully toward the three men. "Do I?" As if summoned by the tension, the three shifted again. This time they did not merely stare. They stepped forward together. No signal passed between them. No words. No visible cue. They simply began walking toward the same distant location they had been gazing at intermittently for the past day. The prince's eyes sharpened. "Hold." The command was crisp and authoritative. It had drawn immediate obedience countless times before. The three did not stop. They continued walking. Ren's head snapped slightly toward the prince. The lack of response was obvious. "Return," the prince said again, voice carrying more force. Nothing. No hesitation. No glance backward. Their steps remained even, steady, purposeful. For the first time since entering the ruin, genuine unease crossed the prince's face. Before, when their focus drifted, a single word had always been enough to snap them back. Their discipline, their loyalty, their awareness would reassert itself. This time it did not. On the other side of the ruin, beneath the same endless twilight sky, the situation was no better. Arian stood beside Michael, her fingers trembling against the reins of her flame lion. Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice unsteady. "I should have listened to you. I thought I could handle it. I thought it was just power." Michael did not answer immediately. His gaze was not on her. It was on the three men standing several steps ahead of them. Cedric, Lucian, Alaric. They were not walking yet, but they were no longer fully present either. Their eyes were fixed on the same distant direction. Their breathing was steady, their expressions blank in a way that felt unnatural. They still reacted when spoken to and still moved when instructed, but there was a thin delay now, a fraction of a second too slow. Arian's tears fell faster. "I can feel it sometimes," she admitted quietly. Like something. Pulling. Like a thought that isn't mine. She swallowed hard. I'm afraid I'll become like them. Michael finally looked at her. He did not see madness in her. He saw fear. And beneath it, resistance. Then he turned his attention fully to the others and activated the Eye of Truth. The world shifted. Surface reality peeled back. The three men standing before him were no longer simply cultivators, strengthened by orbs. In his vision, they were bodies wrapped in something else entirely. Small faces, dozens of them, tiny, faint impressions embedded beneath their skin, along their arms, across their chests, crawling up their necks. The faces did not scream. They did not speak. They simply existed. And every few seconds they shifted position, sliding beneath the skin, like reflections moving across water, rotating and trading places, reconfiguring themselves in subtle, nauseating patterns. Chapter 851, Finding the Source. The impression they gave Michael was unmistakable. Parasitic. It reminded him of a parasite he had once read about. Spinochordodes talinii, a horsehair worm. It infected insects, most commonly grasshoppers and crickets, entering their bodies when they consumed contaminated material. At first, nothing appeared wrong. The host continued feeding, moving, living normally, but the parasite grew. It fed and coiled itself within the host's body cavity, absorbing nutrients while remaining hidden. And when it reached maturity, it took control. The infected insect, a creature that instinctively avoided water its entire life, began to behave differently. It wandered without purpose, paused at strange intervals, lost awareness of danger. Then, inevitably, it approached water. And it jumped. The insect drowned itself, not out of instinct, but because the parasite inside it needed water to complete its life cycle. Once submerged, the worm emerged from the drowned body, leaving behind only a hollow shell. Michael stared at Cedric, Lucien, and Alaric. The comparison settled into place with chilling clarity. They still moved. They still breathed. They still spoke when spoken to. But something inside them had already taken root. Something patient. Something waiting. Through the Eye of Truth, he saw the small faces shift beneath Cedric's skin. They did not appear as separate organisms, but fragments of something larger, rearranging continuously beneath the flesh. Michael followed their line of sight. The endless twilight stretched outward, crystal veins pulsing faintly beneath the ground. Somewhere in that direction was the source, the origin, the water the parasite needed. Or the opposite, the place drawing them in. Movement entered the edge of his perception. A group of figures crossed a distant ridge. They moved in a straight line, boots scraping crystal-veined stone without hesitation. Their weapons hung at their sides. Their eyes faced forward. Michael recognized their armor. Another expedition team. He had seen them hours earlier. Alert, careful, fully aware. Now they walked like sleepwalkers. None of them reacted to distant faceless shapes. None glanced toward Michael or his group. They simply continued forward toward the same unseen destination. Michael's frown deepened. This was not the first time. He had noticed isolated individuals before. Always those who had absorbed the orbs. Always drifting toward the same direction. It was no longer coincidence. Beside him, Ariane's breathing grew uneven. Her grip tightened around the reins of her flame lion. The beast stood close beside her, muscles tense beneath ember-colored fur, golden eyes flicking between its master and the retreating figures. Could feel her fear. Michael felt a faint trace of pity. She had already lost 2 contracted beasts to stronger faceless creatures through a moment of poor judgment. Now something worse had taken root inside her. He shifted his attention back to Cedric, Lucien, and Alaric. For several seconds, nothing changed. Then Cedric stepped forward. Lucien followed. Alaric moved with them, perfectly synchronized. Michael's eyes sharpened. Cedric. No response. Lucien. Nothing. Alaric. Not even a flicker. They walked past him toward the distant horizon. Ariane's voice trembled. They're going too. Michael stepped directly into their path. Cedric did not stop. He adjusted his angle slightly, attempting to move around him without awareness. Michael released his mana. It spread outward in a controlled wave, settling over the three men. Like invisible pressure, a suppressive field. Not enough to harm, enough to stop. Their bodies halted mid-step, muscles tensed. Veins rose faintly beneath their skin. Through the eye of truth, the faces beneath their flesh reacted instantly. They shifted violently, pressing outward as if resisting him. Cedric's foot trembled, then pushed forward. Slowly, against the pressure. Lucian and Alaric did the same. Michael increased the pressure. The air thickened. Still they leaned forward. Arian covered her mouth, horror widening her eyes. Michael increased it again. Cedric's knee bent at a dangerous angle. Bone creaked faintly. He did not react. Lucian's shoulder tore slightly. Blood seeped through his sleeve. He did not slow. Alaric's ankle twisted. His heel dragged against stone. They continued. Michael understood immediately. If he held them like this, they would destroy their own bodies just to keep moving. He released the field. The pressure vanished. They staggered once, steadied, and continued forward as if nothing had happened. Michael watched them go. Watched their backs shrink into silhouettes against the dim horizon. Beside him, Arian broke. Her flame lion shifted closer, lowering its head beside her shoulder, rumbling softly. Could not understand the cause, but it understood. Distress. Arian clutched her chest. Her breath shattered into sobs. I should have listened. Her voice cracked, dignity abandoned. I saw them grow stronger. I saw them absorb the orbs and nothing happened. They fought better, moved faster, and I thought I was the only fool standing still. Her shoulders shook violently. I couldn't take it anymore. Tears streamed down her face. I should have listened to you. The flame lion pressed closer, its warmth grounding her, tail flicking. Restlessly, Michael did not answer immediately. He understood her. The pressure of watching others advance while you remained behind. He understood it intimately, but his thoughts had already moved elsewhere. He too had used the cultivation orbs. Not many, not recklessly, but he had. The difference lay in how. Michael lowered his gaze slightly, feeling the faint ache deep within his soul. He remembered the first orb. He remembered the faces. He had not trusted it, so he had forced it through Lily's law, her devouring trait, a law capable of consuming anything that contained essence, breaking it down, stripping it to its purest components. It did not matter whether the essence came from flesh, crystal, poison, or stranger origins. If it had substance, it could be devoured. The limit of the law was his own limit. Michael had forced the orb through that process. Only after it had been devoured, purified, and reduced did he absorb what remained. And the difference had been undeniable. No faces appeared beneath his skin. No infestation. When he used the eye of truth on himself, he saw only his own form. More than that, the fracture in his soul had eased. Not healed completely, but softened. The devoured essence had repaired part of the damage. Proof appeared immediately. Several dozen contract slots had recovered. Michael crouched beside Ariane. Her flame lion watched him closely, but did not interfere. He placed a steady hand against her upper back. Breathe, he said quietly. She tried, failed, tried again. I knew it was wrong, she whispered. I knew it was too easy, but every time nothing happened, it felt like I was the only coward. Her fingers tightened in the lion's mane. I couldn't keep falling behind. Michael kept his voice calm. I'll see what I can do. Her head lifted slightly. You can fix it? He did not promise. I'll see what I can do. To her it was enough. Her breathing steadied slightly. The flame lion relaxed by a fraction, sensing her emotional shift. Michael's gaze returned to the horizon. His expression hardened. He was helping her. He was not indifferent enough to watch her be consumed. But that was not the only reason. The condition of his soul mattered more than anything. Ascending perfectly required it. And the fragment he had devoured had already proven something. Undeniable. Could heal him. Not completely, but enough to matter. If a fragment could do that, then what about the source itself? His thoughts sharpened. Hesitation remained. He understood the danger. If the ruin could infest others, the origin could be far worse. But hesitation also meant time. And time meant more unknown changes. In any case, he could not leave the ruin immediately, which meant he had only one option. Advance and find the source. Chapter 852 Awakening. Deep within the ruin, far beyond the crystal-veined plains and the wandering silhouettes of the infected, the strange building stood in silence. It had no windows, no doors that could be seen from the outside. Yet its interior existed. The air inside was thick, and within that chamber, laughter echoed. It spread through the room, and at the center of the chamber lay a figure. The body was still. The eyes were open, unfocused. Around the fallen figure stood several others. They formed a circle, evenly spaced, their posture upright, their heads tilted slightly downward as if observing something sacred. None of them spoke. Their faces were calm, empty. Beneath their skin, faint distortions shifted. After hundreds of years, my dream of leaving this damn place is finally close. The voice did not come from a mouth. It came from the air itself. The figure on the ground twitched faintly, fingers curling and uncurling without direction. The voice lingered, tasting the moment. This body, a pause, is not the best. The prone figure's chest rose slowly, unnaturally steady. But it is good enough to hold me before the final step after all this. The standing figures did not react. They did not breathe any differently. But beneath their skin, the faint movements grew more active, sliding, gathering, converging toward their cores. For the first time since my imprisonment, I will leave this ruin. The words were not triumphant. They were certain. It had already decided and had already begun. But a vessel must be able to endure my power. This shell cannot last long. If that is so, it must be improved. The standing figures shifted slightly. They all share the same foundation. The voice moved through the bodies. They will create something better. Silence followed. Not empty silence. Expectant silence. Then the command came. Kill yourself. The standing figures moved at once. One raised its hand. Without hesitation, its fingers drove into its own throat. Flesh parted. Blood spilled. It did not cry out or resist. Another followed. Its hand plunged into its own chest, forcing past ribs with slow, grinding pressure. Bone cracked. Blood poured. Still, it remained silent. A third tilted its head sharply. Its neck twisted too far. Clean final break. One by one, they destroyed themselves. Their bodies collapsed inward, essence spilling free. The crystal veins flared brighter. The prone figure at the center shuddered violently. His chest expanded, collapsed, expanded again. Then from the air itself a shadow emerged. It gathered above the fallen vessels, coiling like smoke dragged by. Invisible gravity. For a moment it hovered. Then it plunged straight into the body at the center. The prone figure convulsed. His back arched violently. Fingers clawed into the stone floor hard enough to crack it. Its mouth opened wide, but no scream emerged. Beneath its skin something moved. The faint distortions beneath the flesh thickened, merging, sinking, inward toward the core. For several seconds nothing happened. Then the body inhaled. His fingers twitched. The laughter returned. At last. Suddenly the ruin shook. Crystal veins beneath the ground flared violently, and the air vibrated with a deep, grinding resonance that spread outward in all directions. Across the plains, the infected reacted instantly. They ran. Figures that had once moved in slow, mindless procession now broke into desperate motion, sprinting across crystal-veined stone with reckless urgency. Their bodies tore themselves apart in their haste, all toward one location, the building. They came from every direction, converging like iron drawn toward a magnet. Inside the chamber, the body rose, slowly, unsteadily. It pushed itself upright, joints cracking as fresh strength flooded the vessel. The vessel was human. Well, mostly inhuman, at least in shape. Tall, thin. Its skin was pale to the point of translucence, crystal veins faintly visible beneath the surface, pulsing with dim inner light. Its eyes opened fully, black, not dark, black. There was no scara, no iris, only depthless void. It flexed its fingers. Weak, it murmured softly. It took a step forward toward the exit. It stepped outside. For the first time in centuries, it stood outside that trap-like building. The endless twilight stretched above. It inhaled again, a deeper breath. This is freedom. It was then that two forces descended. They arrived without warning. One sharp, one absolute. A blade of sword chi tore through the air, invisible yet undeniable, compressing space itself as it fell toward the figure's neck. At the same instant, a second force struck from above. Imperial chi condensed into crushing authority, heavy enough to distort gravity. Two attacks, perfectly timed and perfectly lethal. The figure reacted instantly. His head turned slightly. His hand rose casually. The attack struck and shattered. The sword chi broke apart like glass striking an immovable wall, fragments dispersing into nothing before reaching flesh. The imperial pressure collapsed inward, crushed and erased as if it had never existed. The figure did not move, but the building behind it did not survive. The delayed force continued past it, slamming into the structure. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the entire building collapsed. The structure that had endured centuries turned to dust in an instant, reduced to drifting fragments carried by dead air. Silence followed. The figure slowly lowered its hand. Its black eyes shifted forward. Two figures stood in the distance. Unfamiliar. One stood upright, posture straight, presence heavy with natural authority. The other stood slightly behind and to the side, relaxed, balanced, one hand resting loosely at his side. Sword intent radiated from him even without a drawn weapon, invisible yet sharp enough to cut. Both were young and powerful. If Michael had been here, he would have recognized them. Immediately, the 10th Prince and Ren. Dust drifted between them. For a moment no one moved. Then the figure smiled. Its lips stretched slowly, expression unfamiliar to the vessel wearing. "Both of you are quite high grade," it said softly. Its voice carried easily across the distance. Chapter 853 Hostages? The meaning behind those words was simple. High grade. It saw them not as opponents or as people, but as vessels. At a glance, it could already perceive the structure of their souls and bodies, the integrity of their foundations, the stability of their meridians, and the density of their essence. Either one of them alone was sufficient to house its soul, sufficient to carry it beyond this ruin. And if given time, either vessel could allow it to recover and possibly even possess greater strength than it did before its imprisonment. It was not wrong. The 10th Prince of the Lionheart Kingdom and Ren were not ordinary. One carried the blood of royalty. The 10th Prince was the most favored prince of the Lionheart Kingdom, so he never lacked resources. From birth, his foundation had been tempered through rare medicines, protected cultivation methods, and ancestral inheritance. Beneath his flesh flowed a bloodline that had endured for generations. The other was different. Ren had no royal lineage or vast inheritance, no mountains of resources poured into him from birth. Yet within him existed something rarer, the root of swordsmanship. It was not something granted by blood or wealth. It was not something that could be bought or transferred either. It was born through comprehension so deep that the sword ceased to be a weapon and became part of the self. His foundation was clean, pure, sharp, and in some ways even superior. In any era, people like the prince were common to see, but individuals like Ren were as rare as phoenix feathers. They were simply exceptional. Individually, both were exceptional. Together, they were perfect. One provided stability and bloodline. The other provided purity and transcendence. Either could serve as a vessel. Both could serve as materials to create an even greater vessel. Across the ruined ground, the 10th prince felt a chill crawl down his spine. He could not explain it. There was no visible killing intent or overwhelming pressure. Yet the figure's gaze made his instincts scream. Beside him, Ren felt it as well. His fingers tightened slightly around the hilt of his sword. The wooden grip was familiar. The remnant of the wooden sword he had carried since childhood had been preserved and integrated into this blade gifted by his teacher, its accumulated comprehension transforming it into something far beyond ordinary steel. Neither spoke or hesitated before they attacked again. At this point, anyone with eyes could tell the strange figure was the cause of the entire situation in the ruin, and it was likely in no way good news. They attacked, this time without restraint. The 10th prince moved first. His sword left its sheath in a smooth, controlled motion. The blade gleamed faintly, its surface etched with ancient channels designed to conduct energy without resistance. This was a gift from his aunt for his expedition, a weapon taken from the kingdom treasury specifically for him. It was not an ordinary treasure. The sword held a finite reserve of recoverable chi, sealed within its core. Each time it was drawn, that chi could be awakened and directed, then slowly restored over time. It had once belonged to the second king of the Lionheart Kingdom, a genius who had walked the path of swordsmanship. Under his hands, the weapon had carved through battlefields and legends alike, until it was sealed away as an inheritance, too valuable to be wasted on mediocrity. But that was only part of its value. The blade had been forged not only as a weapon, but as a conduit. Every channel etched into its surface was designed to conduct chi with near-perfect efficiency. In the hands of a skilled mage, it functioned no differently from a high-grade wand, allowing spells to be formed faster, stabilized more easily, and released with far greater precision. That was the true reason his aunt had given it to him. Not to turn him into a swordsman, but to amplify what he already was. The prince's talent had always been compared to his aunt's for a reason. Their strength lay in magic. However, the Lionheart bloodline did not favor magic alone. Tempered the body as well. Those of Lionheart blood rarely lacked close combat ability, even if their primary path was not the blade. And the prince had never been the type to rely on a single advantage. He pushed energy into the sword's channels. The weapon responded instantly. The sealed chi inside it stirred, awakened by the bloodline, and mixed with his own power in a controlled flow. Energy flowed through it smoothly, without resistance, stabilizing beneath his control. The edge grew sharper without changing shape. The air around it compressed. The prince stepped forward. He made a cut. A crescent of sword light flew out. Ren followed and stepped in behind the prince's attack and cut. Along a different, one strike high, one strike low, line. The figure watched both attacks arrive. Then it lifted its hand. A flick of fingers. Wind gathered. A thin, concentrated sheet of airflow, compressed until it became a transparent barrier. The prince's sword crescent struck it and split apart. The force was sliced into two halves and redirected harmlessly into the ground on either side, carving twin trenches that smoked where crystal veins were exposed. Ren's cut arrived a heartbeat later. The figure reacted instantly. The air in front of it flashed with pale blue frost. A film of ice formed instantly. Ren's sword chi hit it. The ice cracked but held before it shattered outward in a burst of shards that tore across the space between them like razors. Ren leaned, twisting his shoulders, blade moving in a small circle. The shards missed his throat by a hair and embedded in the ground. Behind him, sizzling as they melted into steam. The prince did not slow. His second strike came immediately, the sword's chi surging again, channeled into a thrust that compressed into a single point. The figure's expression did not change. Earth rose as a slab of stone pulled from beneath the crystal-veined ground, dense and thick, layered with darker mineral-like armor. The thrust hit and the slab exploded. But behind it, the figure had already moved half a step, tilted its head slightly. "Is that all?" it said, voice calm. The prince answered with action. He slashed again, this time with a wide arc that dragged chi through the air and formed a cutting field. Ren slipped into that field as he moved with the prince's cut, using it as cover, his own sword chi sharpening to a thin line. One step, two, then a sudden burst. His blade appeared at the figure's ribs in an instant. The figure countered with fire. A vertical flare ignited between them. Ren's blade met the fire. His attack held for a fraction of a second, pushing through. The tip reached cloth. Then the figure's skin. A thin line opened. Black blood seeped out. Ren's eyes sharpened. He had cut it. The figure looked down at the wound with mild surprise. Then it smiled. It lifted its palm and water condensed in the air, drawn from nothing, forming a thin stream that wrapped around the wound and sealed it. The flesh pulled together unnaturally fast, leaving only a faint mark. Good, it murmured. The 10th prince narrowed his eyes. Who are you? His voice carried clearly across the fractured ground. The figure tilted its head slightly. For a moment it did not answer. Then its lips curved faintly. You may call me. It paused, as if selecting something from memory long buried. Varian. Ren felt the hairs on his arms rise for reasons he could not name. The prince tightened his grip on his sword. Varian, he repeated, steady. You caused this ruin, the infestation, the orbs. It did not deny it. It did not confirm it either. Its black eyes moved between them slowly. I did not expect such vessels to arrive so soon, Varian said softly. His gaze lingered on the prince's sword, then on Ren's grip. Your foundations are pleasing. The words sent a chill down Ren's spine. The prince's expression hardened. He raised his sword again. We didn't come here to entertain you. Varian's smile widened slightly. Yes, it said. I am aware. It lifted its hand slowly. Unfortunately, it continued calmly, I do not have time to entertain you either. The next thing both youths saw was their vision filled with darkness. As they lost consciousness, soon their bodies floated to Varian's side and stayed there in mid-air. However, just as Varian was about to move to another location to complete its preparations to leave this ruin perfectly, it turned to a certain spot and spoke. Why don't you come out now? It said as it stared at the empty air. Nothing happened until a few seconds later, when a youth with green eyes appeared out of nowhere. You're quite sensitive, Michael stated. Chapter 854 Confrontation 1. A few minutes ago, just as Michael had decided to go after what he suspected was the source of infection, the whole realm suddenly started shaking violently. Though it lasted only a short moment, the impression it left behind was heavy. The crystal veins beneath the ground had flared, pulsing brighter than before, as if something deep within the ruin had awakened. It had stopped quickly, but what followed was far worse. Both Michael and Arian watched as dozens of participants like them ran like madmen toward a certain familiar direction. The same direction Cedric, Lucian, and Alaric had gone. The same direction every infected individual had been drawn. They did not run with discipline or coordination. They ran with desperation. Some stumbled and fell only to force themselves back to their feet immediately. Others ignored wounds that would have crippled a normal person. Blood trailed behind them in thin streaks across the crystal-veined ground. It was as if something had called them. Michael's eyes narrowed. This was different from before. Previously, they had walked like puppets guided by invisible threads. Now they ran. Beside him, Arian suddenly stiffened. Michael noticed it immediately. Her fingers tightened around the reins of her flame lion until her knuckles turned pale. Her breathing grew uneven again. But this time it was not only fear. It was something else. Her pupils trembled slightly. Her gaze remained fixed on the distant direction where the others had gone. Michael's expression hardened. He extended his senses carefully. There it was. Faint fluctuation. It was subtle. Not enough to be seen by ordinary perception. But through the eye of truth it became clear. The distortions beneath her skin had grown more active. The faint faces shifted faster now, their outlines more defined than before. It appeared they were responding to the same call. Michael felt a cold realization settle in his chest. Ariane trembled. Her lips parted slightly. "I." Her voice faltered. She lifted a hand slowly, pressing it against her chest. Her heart was racing fast. Her breathing hitched. "I can feel it," she whispered. Tears began to form in her eyes before she even realized it. A single drop slid down her cheek. Then another. "I don't understand," she said weakly. "What is happening to me?" Her flame lion shifted beside her, sensing her distress immediately. The beast pressed its massive body closer, its warmth radiating against her leg, rumbling low in its throat. But even it looked uneasy. Its golden eyes flicked toward the distant horizon, toward the call. Ariane's grip tightened in its mane unconsciously. Her shoulders trembled. "I don't want to go," she whispered. Another tear fell. "But," her voice broke, "something is pulling me." Michael watched her carefully. His jaw tightened slightly. The timing was too precise. The moment the realm had shaken was the moment whatever lay at the center awakened. Every infected individual had responded, including her. Before, Michael had only suspected there was something at that destination. Now he was sure. Ariane's reaction confirmed it more clearly than anything else. The infection inside her had shifted from passive to active the moment the source awakened, as if a dormant seed had finally received water. Michael's eyes narrowed. Unfortunately, he could tell he did not have enough time. If he did not do something soon, there was a great possibility Ariane would turn into the others, the deeply infected participants who were now sprinting toward the call without hesitation. And if the situation worsened, it could start to threaten him as well. Michael did not dare to overestimate himself. This place had once been the domain of a deceased rank 4 superpower. Even dead, a rank 4 could leave behind traps, wills, and remnants that could drown a rank 2 without effort. As those thoughts passed through his mind, Michael forced his voice to remain steady. "Ariane." She flinched, as if his voice pulled her back from the edge. Her eyes were wet. Her lips trembled. Michael stepped closer and placed a hand on her shoulder, firm enough to ground her. "Listen to me," he said. Ariane swallowed hard, forcing herself to focus on him instead of the horizon that called to her. "I don't know what's happening," she whispered. "Feels like something is pulling me apart." "I know," Michael replied quietly. He held her gaze. "Try your best to hold on," he said. "No matter what you feel, do not follow it." Her breathing hitched. "You'll figure it out?" she asked, desperate. Michael did not answer directly. Instead, he reached inward into his soul space. A palm-sized coffin appeared in his hand. The damaged coffin of the forgotten. The moment it manifested, Ariane stiffened. Her pupils shrank. The flame lion reacted even more strongly. A low, instinctive growl vibrated from deep within its chest, its massive frame shifting protectively in front of her. Its golden eyes locked onto the coffin, then onto Michael, uncertain and tense. Ariane's fingers tightened in its mane unconsciously. But what happened next startled them both as a figure appeared out of nowhere. It was Spartan. He wore a dark robe. His posture was straight and composed. The flame lion bared its teeth. Its mane flickered faintly with heat. Ariane's heart pounded faster. Spartan lowered his head slightly toward Michael, ignoring the hostility of the beast completely. "My master," Spartan said calmly, his voice smooth and respectful. "What should I do for you?" Michael did not hesitate. "Stay with her," he said. Spartan's gaze shifted toward Ariane. The moment his eyes landed on her, she froze. The flame lion stepped forward half a pace, placing itself directly between Spartan and its master, body lowered protectively, ready to attack if necessary. Michael raised his hand slightly. "It's fine," he said calmly. The flame lion hesitated. It did not fully relax, but it did not attack either. Michael looked directly at Spartan. "Protect her," he said. "Do not let her move toward the source, even if she loses control." Spartan bowed his head slightly. It did not know what its master meant by losing control, but it would protect her whether she liked it or not. As you command. Michael turned his gaze toward the distant horizon, where the infected figures had disappeared beyond the crystal ridge. Chapter 855 Confrontation 2. After leaving Arian with Spartan, Michael switched to Fade State with his law. Among his many undead, there were not a lot that could match Fade's stealthy traits and abilities, and it was proven when even a former rank 4 took so long to notice him. How Michael knew the other party was rank 4 was quite simple. It was easy to recognize the type of bullies that overwhelmed you without trying. The only misconception Michael had was that Varian was the rank 4 superpower that once had this domain. It gave rise to the thought that what was happening was probably a sneaky ploy made hundreds of years ago to reincarnate and start a new life. This was the supernatural world. Anything was possible. Michael let his imagination run freely. As for the prowess Varian showed, such as dismissing attacks and using multiple elements, this was not shocking for those who could use laws. When one stepped onto the path of law cultivation, previous limitations no longer applied to them. As for how he dismissed the attacks, Michael had a feeling it had something to do with the comprehension of a former rank for superpower. He might be weaker now that even Ren could harm him, but comprehension was not something that could be taken away. However, it was precisely because of this weakness that Michael still dared to stay. If this had been an outrageous foe at full strength, he would have risked using wisdom's power to teleport outside the realm. His life mattered more than anything else in these ruins. Michael stood several dozen meters away, his form still half-merged with Fade's law. His presence thinned to the point where even light seemed to slip past him. Yet Varian had noticed him. That alone confirmed everything Michael needed to know. This thing was far beyond anything else in the ruin. Still, Michael did not retreat. His green eyes remained fixed on the floating bodies of the 10th Prince and Ren, suspended helplessly beside the pale figure. For a brief moment, neither of them spoke. The air was still. Crystal veins beneath the ground pulsed faintly, their dim glow reflecting against Varian's translucent skin. Michael broke the silence first. "Are you the one responsible for all this?" he asked calmly. His voice carried no fear or hostility, only certainty. Varian did not answer immediately. Its black eyes rested on him, unmoving. However, Michael noticed it instantly. The hesitation. It was subtle, buried beneath the creature's calm exterior, but it existed. Varian was observing him the same way it had observed the prince and Ren earlier. Michael could feel it. A faint probing pressure brushed against him, like cold air slipping over his skin. It was not physical. Varian's pupils did not change. His expression did not shift. But inside something recoiled. For the first time since awakening, it could not see, could perceive the prince clearly. His bloodline shone like a torch, could perceive Ren even more clearly. His sword root was like a sharpened edge cutting through reality itself. But this one, this youth with green eyes, was wrong. Its perception slid across him without resistance. Yet nothing was revealed. It was like trying to grasp mist, or staring into something that was both present and not. That frightened it. Not visibly or outwardly, but deeply. Unknown variables were dangerous, especially in its current weakened state. Responsible, Varian repeated softly, as if tasting the word. Michael did not move. "You created the orbs, right?" Michael said. "You infected them." His gaze shifted briefly toward the unconscious prince and Ren. "What are you up to?" Silence stretched between them. Varian's eyes narrowed by a fraction. "What are you?" Varian asked quietly. Michael tilted his head slightly. "That was my question." For the first time, Varian did not answer immediately. A faint crease formed between its brows, almost imperceptible. A brief silence followed. Neither moved. The crystal veins beneath the ground pulsed slowly, their dim glow reflecting off the unconscious bodies floating beside Varian. Michael's gaze remained steady. Varian's remained fixed on him. Then, the ground exploded. Crystal-veined stone shattered outward as something massive forced. its way up from beneath the surface. Fragments of hardened mineral flew in all directions, some embedding deep into the surrounding terrain with sharp cracks. A massive arm emerged first. Thick, blackened, veins of crystal pulsed beneath its skin like molten glass. Then the rest followed. A giant creature pulled itself free from the ground with violent force, its massive frame towering over both Michael and Varian. It resembled an ape, but distorted. Its proportions were wrong. Its limbs were too long. Its shoulders were too wide. Its face had no features, only smooth flesh stretched tight across where eyes and a mouth should have been. Crystal veins crawled across its entire body, pulsing violently. Michael's eyes narrowed immediately. A rank 3 presence. He could feel it clearly. However, with his eye of truth, Michael could tell it was not the layered depth of someone who understood laws. Just raw, overwhelming physical strength. Its muscles flexed, and the ground beneath its feet fractured from the pressure alone. It turned its faceless head toward Michael. Then it moved. Its massive leg drove downward, launching its body forward with explosive force. The ground collapsed behind it as it accelerated, its fist pulling back before swinging forward with enough momentum to tear the air apart. The punch descended toward Michael's head. The sheer force compressed the air into a visible shockwave. If it landed, it would reduce an ordinary rank 2 body to nothing. Michael did not step back. He leaned, just slightly. The fist passed beside his head by less than an inch. The wind alone tore his cloak apart at the edges, sending black fragments scattering into the air. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. He had quite liked that robe. The creature did not slow. Its other arm came immediately, swinging horizontally with brutal speed. Michael's body shifted again. A simple turn of the shoulders. The arm missed him completely and slammed into the ground behind him. The impact shattered the crystal-veined stone like glass. A crater formed instantly, fragments launching outward with lethal velocity. Still, Michael remained standing at its center, untouched. The creature's massive hand descended again, fingers spread wide, intending to crush him outright. Michael moved forward this time. He stepped inside its reach. His fist tightened. No excessive motion. No dramatic preparation. Just a single, clean strike. His arm moved. The punch landed directly against the creature's torso. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the force detonated. A shockwave burst outward from the point of contact, compressing the air into a visible ring. The creature's crystal-veined body buckled inward unnaturally, its massive frame lifting off the ground as if gravity had been erased. The back of its torso exploded outward. The creature was launched backward like a projectile tearing across the ground and carving a deep trench before crashing into the distant crystal ridge. The ridge collapsed. Stone crumbled, and dust filled the air. Silence returned. Chapter 856 Intrusion. It could not be said to be a special trait, but whenever Michael knew there was not a high chance something could kill him, he became far bolder than his cautious self. From the moment Michael saw that this supposedly rank 4 reincarnate was only a severely weakened version, he felt confident. He had done nothing but kill similarly suppressed rank 4 existences back-to-back. Unfortunately, there was no way for Varian to know of that history. However, even without understanding Michael's outrageous past, it was self-aware enough to recognize a freak when it saw one. Michael turned, expecting to see Varian standing where it had stood, but instead, he watched the pale figure shoot away at high speed. Varian was so fast he became a streak of translucent light against the endless twilight. Michael blinked. For a moment, he genuinely thought he had misseen it. Then his lips twitched. "Running?" he muttered, stunned. Where did the dignity of a rank 4 go? Sure, it was weakened now, but damn. It was not even a tactical retreat. Michael's eyes narrowed as he switched to wisdom state. His aura shifted instantly, turning sharp. In a single breath, he closed the distance. He appeared beside Varian as if he had always been there. "So where are you running to?" Michael asked, his voice light, almost amused. Varian's head snapped toward him. For the first time, the calm mask slipped. Its black eyes widened enough for Michael to catch the shock. This speed did not make sense to Varian. Though it could not see through Michael, its perception was still enough to feel the youthful energy inside him, including the restriction that only those below 30 could enter this space. Varian knew Michael was young. Were youths these days this terrifying? Varian's expression tightened. His body shifted, trying to pull further away. Michael did not give it room. He reached out and drove a punch toward its ribs, his intent to stop the escape clear. The fist was fast enough to crack the air. Varian's eyes sharpened. Then it vanished. One moment it was beside Michael, the next it was simply not there, leaving behind a faint distortion that rippled through the air like heat. Spatial travel. Michael's fist cut through empty space. He did not chase blindly. He had become cautious about that ever since his accidental use of spatial travel in Hell. But caution did not mean fear, especially not when he had just watched someone use it cleanly. That alone told him the space here was stable, or at least stable enough. Unfortunately for Varian, Michael had already expected this to happen. The moment he saw Varian flee, Michael had already decided that if Varian could not overpower him, it would try to escape. And if it tried to escape, it would use space. After all, that was the obvious feature of those at this level. Michael's aura sharpened again. Wisdom state tightened around him like a second skin as his senses widened. Varian had reappeared at a distance far from him, and it seemed it was already preparing to vanish again. But the moment it reappeared, Michael was already there. A blur snapped into place before Varian could stabilize its footing. Varian froze. Its pupils did not exist, but the depth of its gaze shifted. Disbelief. How? It still could not understand how someone so young could already grasp the mysteries of space. Michael did not answer. He simply raised his hand and reached forward, palm open. Not a strike this time, but a grip. Varian jerked backward and vanished once more, space snapping shut like a mouth. Michael's hand closed on nothing. He clicked his tongue softly. Varian reappeared far ahead, but before it could react, Michael appeared beside it instantly. Varian stiffened. Its body flinched in a way it could not control. For the first time, its breathing changed. A shallow inhale, sharp and involuntary. Michael's fist was already moving. A direct strike to the side of Varian's abdomen. The punch connected. Varian's body folded inward. A deep shock traveled through it, rippling across the crystal veins, beneath its skin. Then the creature descended aggressively. Varian hit the ground. The impact cracked the crystal vein stone, sending a shockwave outward. A crater formed instantly, and jagged fractures raced across the terrain like spiderwebs. Shards rose and hovered for a split second before dropping back down in a harsh rain. Meanwhile, Michael's mana surged toward the two bodies still in midair. The 10th prince and Ren hung like puppets on invisible strings, their limbs loose, their faces slack with unconsciousness. Michael floated down with them. He descended smoothly, boots lowering until they hovered a breath above the ground. The prince and Ren remained at his side, held aloft by his control. Finally, this should be able to put it down, right? However, even if it's down, how do I get what I need to heal my soul? Michael felt conflicted. Surely he was not going to need to use Lily's law to devour another living being. From the records he had read in the Academy Library, Michael was aware baby supernaturals had done far worse for power. Even the so-called good ones differentiated themselves from demonic supernaturals, but Michael did not think he was quite at that level yet. But then again, even if Varian was the main source of the infection, and Michael was reluctant to devour it in its current state, he should be able to condense all the faceless monsters in this realm for his use. Michael had no plans to let Varian go free, but he felt the alternative toward healing his soul was acceptable for now. However, before Michael could even move, his vision blurred. He was confused at first. Then he recognized what was happening. Michael's mind went cold. Soul intrusion. A pressure slid into him without touching his skin, cold and invasive, like an icy needle pushing through the cracks of his consciousness. It was subtle, almost silent, but the moment it touched his core, everything inside Michael screamed. His instincts exploded. "Get out!" Michael roared, rage tearing through his voice. The air around him trembled as his aura flared. His mana surged, but the invading presence was already inside. It moved like mist, seeping through barriers, searching, probing, trying to find a place to anchor itself. Michael did not know how Varian had done it. Michael's teeth clenched hard enough to ache. His mind shook. Images flashed at the edge of his perception. Not his memories, but fragments of something foreign pressing against his senses. Varian's will. Michael felt it searching for his soul space. Michael's heart hammered. His breathing turned heavy, but he forced himself to stay conscious. He pushed back with everything he had, compressing his mental force into a single point, trying to stab the intruder out of his core. For a moment it worked. The pressure hesitated. Michael felt it recoil slightly. Then it surged again, stronger, sharper. Michael's knees almost buckled. His vision darkened at the edges. The crystal-veined world faded into a tunnel of shadow, and the sound of the ruin became distant, muffled, as if he were sinking underwater. Even with his mana supporting the floating bodies of the 10th Prince and Ren, his control trembled, the two unconscious youths swaying slightly in midair. Michael's fingers twitched. His jaw tightened until it hurt. No, he could not allow this. But the truth was brutal. Even weakened, this thing had once been rank 4. Its comprehension, its will, and its soul strength were not something he could casually resist. Michael was at a disadvantage in one battlefield that mattered most. His sight dimmed further. Darkness crept in like a tide. Michael's breath hitched as the invading presence dug deeper. And for the first time since entering the ruin, Michael felt genuine alarm cut through his confidence. If this continued, he would lose more than a fight. He would lose himself. Varian's consciousness slipped through the last layer of resistance. Like a needle-piercing skin, the crystal-veined ruin vanished. In its place was a strange, dark space where sound did not echo and distance felt meaningless. There was no sky, no ground, only a suffocating void that swallowed light. Varian understood immediately what it was. A soul domain. The youth's soul. It expected fragility. Even talented geniuses had soul spaces that were bare, unrefined, or unstable. A person's power might be terrifying, but their inner world was often simple. However, Varian froze at what lay before him. In the darkness ahead stood a magnificent cauldron. Beside it stood a spear, long, straight, and cold. But the cauldron was different. The moment Varian's perception brushed it, something inside him stirred violently, a buried instinct, a warning, and beneath the warning, a hunger so deep it nearly made his will tremble. Treasure. And it was not a simple treasure. Varian's breath caught, and then he saw it. Far below, half submerged in the darkness like an abyssal monument, was a coffin. It was huge. It lay there like a sleeping beast, heavy enough that the very soul space seemed to bend around it. Chapter 857 Fixing the Soul 1. Even someone dull could tell this soul space was abnormal. Varian was anything but dull. He had lived for centuries and had seen and experienced a great many things. Yet none of them had looked like this. His perception spread cautiously through the dark expanse, brushing against the invisible structure of the youth's soul domain. It did not feel fragile. Felt vast, pure, stable. It was like standing inside an ocean compressed into a single point, endless depth hidden beneath perfect stillness. For a moment, Varian forgot to move. Then realization struck him, and his will trembled. Capacity. This soul had an absurd capacity, far beyond what should be possible for someone who had not yet reached his previous level. Even without understanding its origin, Varian could sense the terrifying potential contained within it. His thoughts ignited. If he could seize this body, if he could overwrite this consciousness and take control, he would not merely survive. He would ascend again faster than he ever had before. His perception sharpened, probing deeper. and then he noticed it. A flaw. It was faint, almost imperceptible beneath the overwhelming purity. A subtle instability buried deep within the foundation, like a crack hidden beneath polished stone. An injury. This lad has a soul injury? Varian stilled. It was nothing like the shattered souls he had seen before. There was no collapse or leaking fragments drifting through the void. Instead, the damage had already stabilized and was recovering. If no one knew what to look for, they would never realize anything was wrong with Michael's soul. His foundation had sealed itself so cleanly that even Varian's centuries of experience could barely detect it. Though he could still tell something was off, it was not enough to weaken Michael's soul value in any meaningful way. Everything else was simply too overwhelming. His perception returned to the cauldron. The moment he focused on it, his will shook again. He did not know what it was. He did not understand its function. But every instinct he possessed screamed that it was something beyond his comprehension. Something that should not exist within a mortal soul. Then there was the spear. And beneath them both, the coffin rested in silence. Varian's breathing grew uneven. Compared to the two talented youths he had abducted, the prince, with his blazing bloodline and the swordsman whose soul cut like steel, this one was beyond comparison. Those two were valuable vessels. This one was perfection, perfect soul, perfect container, perfect future. Greed surged through him. His will expanded, no longer cautious, no longer probing. He reached forward, his consciousness extending through the soul space toward the youth's core. But just as his will moved, the darkness shifted and a voice echoed. "This is new. No wonder I didn't see a system notification just now." The voice came from everywhere. Then Michael appeared. He stood in the darkness as if he had always been there, his figure calm, upright, and faintly illuminated by the dim presence of the cauldron behind him. His green eyes reflected no panic or confusion, only quiet curiosity. He was smiling. Varian froze as he realized he could not move. His soul body, which had moments ago expanded freely across the domain, now felt heavy, bound, suppressed. The darkness thickened around him, saturated with something rich and suffocating. Pure darkness. A dense, overwhelming dark element filled every direction, pressing against his will like an ocean closing around a drowning man. For the first time since entering the youth's soul, fear surfaced. "What did you do to me?" Varian demanded, his voice no longer calm. Michael tilted his head slightly, as if considering the question himself. "Honestly, I am just finding out I can do this," Michael replied. His tone was casual, almost amused. He lifted a hand slightly, watching the darkness ripple in response. "And that I can do it to someone with a soul quality like yours." Varian's will trembled. Impossible. He was a former legendary existence. Even weakened, his soul was refined across centuries. He should have been the dominant force. Yet here he was suppressed. Michael's smile deepened faintly. Inside, his thoughts were far less calm than he showed. When the intrusion first began, there had been a flicker where his consciousness had slipped. He had lost awareness for less than a second, and in that instant something had activated. His talent. The cauldron behind him pulsed faintly. It was the representation of his soul's core ability, the source of infinite evolution that allowed him to evolve almost anything. But it had always required one condition: a soul connection tightly related to ownership or belonging. Michael's gaze returned to Varian. When Varian forced his way into this domain, he had crossed that boundary. He had entered Michael's soul, and the cauldron had recognized him as something inside its domain, something that belonged there. What made it even more unsettling was that the connection Michael had with Varian was different from the one he shared with his undead. Only now did Michael realize that the cauldron could mark anything that entered his soul, placing it in a state similar to being soul-bound. As for why this was possible, Michael had little doubt. It had everything to do with his talent. Talents were rare among awakeners. Even the most common ones were considered precious, and many possessed a physical or spiritual manifestation that represented their nature. Jade Bones was one such example. It was known among the more common talents, yet it remained powerful. Its manifestation was physical, as it was directly tied to the body. One of its defining characteristics, aside from strengthening its host, was absolute purity. No impurity could remain within a body that possessed jade bones. Perhaps infinite evolution functioned in a similar way. Except its domain was not the body. It was the soul. Upon reaching rank 3, the importance of the soul increased drastically. It was where laws were perceived, where essence was refined, and where true transformation began. Chapter 858 Fixing the Soul 2. For a talent like infinite evolution, which could alter the essence of existence and even forcefully elevate beings to rank 3, it was only natural that its manifestation resided within the soul itself. Seen in that light, this new function was not strange. Michael had simply never discovered it before. Bringing anything into his soul space was nearly impossible under normal circumstances. This was the first time something that was not already bound to him had forced its way inside. And the cauldron had responded accordingly. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly as he watched Varian struggle against the invisible restraint. The dark element pressed tighter, like a hand closing around the throat of Varian's will. That system notification, Michael said almost to himself. So that is why it did not appear. This was not the first time something had tried to force its way into him. Jester had done it first. Even now, with Jester bound as his undead, Michael could still remember that moment with a clarity that made his chest tighten. Jester had not attacked his soul directly. It had gone for the mind. It had tried to erase his consciousness, to wipe him out and sit inside his skull like a parasite wearing his face. That attempt had triggered the system, or rather the origin will. Michael was still confused about what truly governed those responses, but it had issued a warning. A cold, absolute notification that had advised him to commit suicide or face true death in origin. It had been so extreme that Michael had never forgotten it. Now Varian had invaded him too, yet the system had stayed silent. No warning, no forced prompt, no harsh line telling him to end himself. At first, Michael had thought it was because he had somehow missed the notification. But standing here, in his own soul space, watching the cauldron pulse behind him, Michael finally understood. Jester had targeted his mind, which was still considered Michael himself. The system had recognized the threat as an external force attempting to delete the host. It had responded. Varian had targeted the soul. But the moment Varian crossed into this domain, the rules changed. Because the instant Varian entered, the cauldron did not treat him as an enemy invading from outside. Treated him as material inside Michael's territory. And because of that classification, the system did not issue a warning. It did not view it as Michael being overwritten. It viewed it as Michael's soul handling what had entered it. Michael's smile returned, but there was no warmth in it. Now it had come down to a single question. What should he do with this soul? The connection between them was already established. Because of that connection, Michael knew he had options. He could evolve it. He could merge it with something else. Or even attempt to merge it with himself. Michael did not even consider the first option seriously. He did not bother to check how many evolution points it would take. A rank for soul was not something to experiment on blindly. Evolution altered essence. If he made a mistake, the backlash could destroy him from within. Worse, it might refine Varian into something even more dangerous. The second option was even more absurd. Merge it with himself? Michael's expression did not change, but inwardly, he dismissed the thought immediately. A rank 4 being was still a rank 4 being. Trying to fuse with it directly would be like inviting poison into his own veins and hoping for the best. But there was another option. Michael's eyes darkened slightly. Before, when Varian still possessed a body, Michael had hesitated. Devouring a living being had crossed a line he had not been ready to face. The idea of consuming something alive, aware, and resisting had unsettled him more than he cared to admit. But this was different. This was only a soul. Yes, it still had consciousness and could resist, but there was no flesh, no breathing body, no heartbeat, only essence. Michael could feel it clearly now. The density and the sheer quality contained within Varian's soul. Even weakened, it radiated a depth that surpassed anything he had consumed before. Curiosity flickered behind his calm expression. If he devoured this, how much would his soul recover? How much closer would he be to advancing? Varian felt it, a faint feeling of threat. His will strained violently against the invisible restraints binding him. The dark element pressing against him thickened further, growing. Heavier, denser, like tar filling every gap. "What are you doing?" Varian demanded, his voice losing its composure for the first time. Michael did not answer immediately. Behind him, the cauldron pulsed. Once, twice. Each pulse sent a ripple across the soul domain, and with it came pressure. Michael lifted his hand slowly. There was no dramatic gesture, no spell circle, no chant, only intent. Deep within the darkness, something else responded. A faint, cold bloom of pale light emerged near Michael's chest, subtle, but unmistakable. It did not burn. It did not radiate heat. Instead, it carried a quiet, devouring stillness. Lily. The trait manifested like layered petals made of translucent essence, unfolding silently within the void of his soul. The moment it appeared, Varian's entire soul shuddered. He understood immediately. Absorption. "No," Varian said sharply, his will surging in panic. "You cannot dash." Michael did not hesitate. The lily-devouring trait activated fully. The first thread of essence separated from Varian's soul. It was microscopic, barely visible. A single strand of refined spiritual substance peeling away like mist. Yet the reaction was immediate. Varian screamed. It was not a physical sound. It was a vibration that rippled across the soul domain itself, raw and distorted. Because even that tiny fragment carried the weight of centuries. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly as the fragment drifted toward him. The moment it touched his soul, it dissolved. Warmth spread outward. The crack buried deep within his soul foundation trembled faintly. The unstable edge that had remained stubbornly incomplete for so long shifted, knitting together by a small margin. Michael exhaled slowly. Even this little, it was a lot. Far more than anything he had ever absorbed before. The quality was different, denser. Varian felt it too, felt himself becoming smaller. "You fool!" Varian roared. "You do not understand what you are touching." Michael met his gaze calmly. "I understand enough," he replied quietly. Behind him, the lily bloomed wider. Chapter 859 Recovery. The second fragment tore free. This time, Michael felt it more clearly. The moment he absorbed it, his entire soul space trembled. The sensation was impossible to mistake. It was the crack that existed deep within his soul foundation, hidden beneath layers of stability. It had not crippled him, but it had limited him. Now it shifted again. Warmth spread outward in slow waves. Michael inhaled instinctively. His capacity had increased. He did not know by how much, but it was definitely more than a few weeks of natural recovery could have given him. Varian felt the loss instantly. His form flickered, faint strands of his soul dissolving into pale currents that drifted toward Michael. "No! Stop!" Varian shouted. His voice was no longer commanding. Cracked. "You do not know what you are doing. That essence is my very being. If you absorb too much, it will destroy you from within." Michael did not respond. Another strand separated. It was bigger than the previous two combined. Another wave of warmth followed. The last traces of instability in his foundation tightened further. Varian's panic deepened. "I can teach you," he said suddenly. The words came quickly now. "I possess centuries of knowledge. Knowledge beyond your imagination. Release me, and I will guide you. I will make you ascend faster than any genius alive." Michael's expression did not change. Another fragment vanished. Varian's form dimmed slightly. Seeing his offer ignored, his voice turned venomous. "You arrogant child," he snarled. "Do you think devouring me will make you strong? You are only poisoning yourself. My will shall remain. I will corrupt you from within. I will twist your soul until you beg for death. Michael only watched quietly, observing the changes within himself. His perception sharpened as his awareness deepened. Even the connection between his soul and the laws became clearer, as if a fog he had never noticed was thinning. He had never truly noticed it until now. Varian, on the other hand, only felt himself being reduced. Desperation surged. "I curse you," he screamed. "Your soul will fracture. Your path will collapse. You will never reach the realm beyond. Never dash." Another fragment vanished. His voice weakened. Michael finally spoke. "You talk too much." Michael increased his devouring speed further, and Varian's scream echoed across the endless dark. Another fragment tore free, then another, and another. Each time he devoured a portion of Varian's essence, Michael felt the change immediately. The crack that had existed in his soul finally gave way. The fracture sealed completely. The instability that had lingered like a hidden weakness was gone, replaced by smooth, unbroken stability. His soul no longer felt like something recovering, felt whole, felt like it had before the injury. No, even better. Michael inhaled sharply, his awareness expanding in every direction. The darkness of his soul space became deeper, more defined. His capacity increased again and again. Each fragment that dissolved into him did not simply fill him, expanded him. His soul space stretched outward subtly, the invisible, boundaries pushing farther into the endless void. Varian, on the other hand, was filled with growing horror. His form was no longer stable. Parts of him dissolved constantly now, drawn helplessly toward Michael. "Stop!" he roared. His voice shook the darkness. Another portion of his soul vanished. His scream broke. "You insect!" he shrieked. "I will not accept this. I refuse to be devoured by a child." His will surged violently, trying to tear free. For a moment, the darkness trembled. But the cauldron pulsed, and the resistance collapsed instantly. Michael felt the essence flow into him in larger waves now. His awareness sharpened further, his perception brushing against truths he had never sensed before. It was as if a ceiling above him had cracked open, revealing greater heights. He felt lingering bits of understanding about his law deepen. Varian's form shrank rapidly, from a towering presence to something smaller, fainter, unstable. His voice turned hoarse. "I curse you," he whispered. Michael did not stop. The last major portion tore free. Varian's form flickered violently, his outline breaking apart like ash in the wind. Hatred filled what remained of his will. His presence fractured further. "I hate you." Another piece vanished. "I hate you." Only a faint outline remained now, and with the last of his strength, Varian screamed, "I curse you, bastard." Then he disappeared completely. Silence returned. Michael stood alone in the endless dark. His soul space felt vast, whole, and far larger than before. The first thing Michael did was check the changes he had felt while devouring the defeated rank 4 superpower. I knew it. Seeing how many contract slots he now possessed, the method he used to directly gauge the strength of his soul on a surface level, Michael felt excitement rise within him. It was a staggering 1,858 slots, a couple hundred more than before his injury. After the excitement settled, Michael could not help but feel a trace of regret. A large portion of the essence he devoured had gone toward repairing his soul. If he had never been injured, his contract slots might have surpassed 2,000 by now. That was a terrifying thought. If they were all filled, even the damaged coffin of the Forgotten might struggle to carry them unless he evolved the treasure further or forced all his undead into human form. Michael then turned his attention to his next gain, something he had not fully expected. "My previous thinking was wrong," he said quietly. "Even if I could have ascended to rank 3 with my injured soul, it would have been imperfect. I was judging myself by the standards of others. But I should be my own standard. The reason for this realization was clear. Now that his soul was whole again, his law comprehension had surged to 89% completion. Only 11% remained. The gap between him and rank 3 was no longer distant. It was inevitable. After I leave this place, I will have my other body stop cultivating. Together, we will gather corpses, Michael said calmly. Only after filling every contract slot will I continue cultivating. Otherwise, I might ascend accidentally. His eyes darkened slightly. That would be wasteful. Chapter 860 changes. Michael's consciousness withdrew from the darkness as his awareness rose toward the surface. His eyes opened. The crystal-veined ruin reappeared around him exactly as he had left. And then, in front of him, a body fell. Michael moved instantly. He stepped forward and caught it before the momentum could carry it into a full collapse, his hand closing around the shoulder. It was Varian's body, cold, but not dead. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. The chest still rose and fell faintly. It was breathing, yet something was missing. Michael extended his perception deeper, letting his senses brush against the interior. After a few seconds, he withdrew. It's an empty shell. The soul that had once animated it had been completely devoured, leaving behind only flesh that continued its automatic functions like a machine that had lost its operator. Michael studied it in silence. The body was not particularly special in any form, which made him wonder what to do with it. Then an idea formed in his mind. However, he would need to leave the ruins first before he could implement his plan. His storage space opened, and the body vanished instantly, pulled into the dimensional void without resistance. Michael's gaze then shifted to the 10th Prince and Ren, who still floated nearby, suspended by his mana. Their bodies remained limp. Michael stared at them briefly. Then a faint, almost amused thought surfaced. Why was it that rank 4 superpowers loved kidnapping people after knocking them unconscious? He had seen it happen before, or rather experienced it once. They never killed immediately. They always took. Michael exhaled quietly. He did not wake them. Instead, he lifted his head and looked outward at the realm itself. Only now did he notice it. The crystal veins running through the ground flickered weakly. Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. What happens to a realm? He murmured softly. When its owner dies? A few moments earlier, far away from the ruin's center, Arian collapsed to her knees. The suddenness of it left her breathless. One moment, the familiar pulling sensation had been there deep, inside her chest. Then it vanished. Completely. Arian's eyes widened as she clutched her chest, fingers tightening against the fabric of her uniform. The absence felt unreal. At the same time, another sensation followed. Weakness. Her mana receded inward, the borrowed strength peeling away from her like mist under sunlight. The cultivation orbs embedded within her system no longer responded. Their enhancement faded rapidly, returning her to her natural state. Her breathing grew uneven, but she did not panic, because unlike before, this weakness felt right. It was hers. Her shoulders trembled. Relief flooded through her. Arian lowered her head, her blonde hair falling forward as tears spilled freely from her eyes. She did not try to stop them. She could feel it. Whatever had been wrong with her was now gone. Her chest tightened as her thoughts shifted instinctively to one person, Sir Mike. Her fingers curled against the crystal-veined ground as her tears fell. Faster. It must have been him. There was no one else. Arian's lips trembled faintly. She did not know how he did it or what he did, but he had done it. He had saved her once again. At the same time, an intense feeling of sadness and regret filled her. Back at the ruin's center, Michael stood in silence as the crystal veins beneath his feet flickered weakly, their glow unstable. His gaze lowered again to the 2 unconscious figures suspended beside him, Ren and the 10th Prince. Both floated motionless, held upright by thin currents of mana. Michael had unconsciously maintained even while his consciousness had been deep within his soul space. Michael studied them quietly for several seconds. He could leave them like this. The realm was already destabilizing. Eventually, the remnant forces governing the space would pull them. But after a moment of thought, Michael sighed softly. He stepped forward. His mana shifted, lowering Ren gently until his boots touched the crystal-veined ground. The swordsman's body swayed slightly, limp from prolonged unconsciousness. Michael raised his hand and placed 2 fingers lightly against Ren's forehead. A small, controlled pulse of mana entered as a stimulus. It was just enough to nudge his consciousness back toward the surface. The reaction was immediate. Ren's brows twitched faintly. His breathing hitched. Then his eyes opened abruptly. For a moment, they were unfocused, his gaze drifting across the fractured terrain, the dimming veins, and the endless twilight sky. Above, confusion, disorientation. Then his pupils focused. "Sir Mike." Ren's voice came out rough. Michael withdrew his hand and nodded once. "You're awake." Ren blinked several times, forcing himself upright. His body trembled slightly, weakened by whatever Varian had done to him, but his instincts remained sharp. His eyes moved quickly, scanning the area. Then he noticed the absence of the figure that had once dominated. The ruin, the overwhelming pressure was gone. "Where is it?" Ren asked quietly. Michael did not answer immediately. Instead, he glanced briefly toward the 10th prince, who still floated, unconscious several meters away. Michael had made the deliberate choice to wake only Ren. Ren was his friend, someone he trusted. The prince, on the other hand, Michael's expression remained calm. He did not dislike him, but he had no interest in touching him with his mana any more than necessary. So he ignored him. Ren followed his gaze and noticed the prince as well. "He's alive," Ren said. "Yes." Ren exhaled quietly, relief flickering across his face before his attention returned to Michael. His eyes narrowed slightly. "You did something," Ren said. Not a question. A statement. Michael met his gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Michael looked past him, toward the flickering horizon of the realm. "It's over," he said simply. Ren stared at him for another second. Then he nodded. He did not press further, because whatever Michael had done, he could feel it. The realm itself was no longer the same. Chapter 861 Resistance. Not only could Ren feel it, Ariane, her tamed beast, Spartan, Michael, and many other participants who were still conscious sensed a subtle resistance building around them. Even someone who had never stepped into a constructed realm before but possessed a bit of knowledge would immediately understand what was happening. Simply put, they did not have much time left in this place. "It's a bit ahead of schedule, but at least nothing too bad happened," Michael joked lightly, a faint smile touching his lips. Ren looked at him and, after a brief pause, returned a smile of his own. It was smaller and less carefree. "It wasn't exactly perfect either," Ren said quietly. "Because of that evil spirit's scheme, some people actually lost their lives in this realm." His voice remained steady, but the weight behind his words was unmistakable. Michael fell silent. He did not look away, but his gaze sharpened slightly. "I know," he said at last. He exhaled softly. "As long as we're alive," Michael added calmly. "It's fine." It was not indifference. It was practicality. The dead could no longer be helped. The living still had a path forward. Ren held his gaze, then nodded. "You're right." His expression softened faintly. "And thank you for saving me." The gratitude was simple and direct. There was no dramatic bow or exaggerated display, just sincerity. Ren did not question Michael about the figure. He did not ask what truly happened. He understood that if Michael wished to explain, he would have done so already. If not, pressing would only complicate matters. Trust did not always require answers. Ren adjusted the unconscious prince over his shoulder as the rejection force around them intensified. "I shouldn't take more of your time," he said. "Looks like we're being kicked out anyway." A faint distortion wrapped around both of them, pale light outlining their silhouettes as the expulsion began. Michael gave a small nod but did not step back. "Not yet," he said calmly. Ren paused. Michael's gaze shifted briefly toward the distance. I still need to go back, he added. Ariane is out there. And his undead, Michael added silently in his mind. He did not elaborate further. He simply did not allow the process to complete. His mana subtly anchored him in place, resisting the pull for just a moment longer. Ren smirked faintly. Aren't we going to see each other outside anyway? Michael let out a quiet huff. Probably. They shared a brief laugh. The light around Ren intensified, wrapping him and the prince like a cocoon as space distorted violently. Then it stopped. The light flickered once and vanished. Ren's smile faded first. The distortion collapsed, the air snapping back into place with a low tremor. The outline of expulsion dissolved like mist. Yet the pressure remained stronger now. That's not normal, Ren muttered. Michael did not answer immediately. His eyes slowly lifted toward the sky. The realm was still rejecting them. The force pressing against their existence had not weakened, but they had not been expelled even though the process had clearly begun. That meant only one thing. Something was interfering. Ren adjusted his grip on the prince. Shouldn't I be expelled? He asked quietly. You should, Michael replied, voice calm but distant. The realm had lost its owner. Its internal system was purging foreign presence, and yet it had failed. Something was definitely wrong. Ren's jaw tightened. At this point, he was starting to regret listening to his master's suggestion to come here. So what's stopping it? Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. I don't know, he said honestly. But be careful. Ren's gaze sharpened. Careful of what? Anything, Michael replied. If the realm is rejecting us but can't expel us, then something is resisting the rules. That doesn't sound good. He glanced toward the direction he had come from, then back to Ren's face. If you can, go meet your other teammates and check how they're doing, Michael said. Or wait for me here. Either way, don't wander. Without a reason. Ren hesitated for a moment, weighing it. Then he nodded. It's better I check on them. The prince and I ran past them earlier. If I trace my path back, I should find them. Michael did not argue. He only gave a short nod. Good. Don't take risks. Ren adjusted the unconscious prince on his shoulder, then offered Michael a quick, smaller smile. You should be safe too, he said. Before Michael could reply, Ren turned and sprinted off. Michael let out a quiet breath. His thoughts shifted to another figure. Yuga. Michael shook his head slightly. Hopefully he's all right, he murmured. Then he turned and dashed off in the opposite direction, following the path he had taken earlier. It did not take long for him to see some familiar figures. Because he had run above them before, he found them where he expected. 3 bodies lay scattered across the cracked terrain. His teammates, they looked weak. Their faces were pale, their breathing shallow, their mana almost non-existent. But they were alive. Michael did not waste time. Without thinking too much about it, he extended his mana and wrapped it around them carefully, lifting them off the ground like weightless stones, and dragged all 3 with him as he made his way toward Ariane. Soon, Michael was back at the place where he had left Ariane. Ariane was still where he had last seen her. Spartan stood protectively at her side. The lion's mane bristled slightly as Michael approached, but the tension eased the moment he recognized him. Ariane looked up. For a brief second, relief flashed across her face. Michael slowed to a stop. The 3 unconscious teammates floated behind him, suspended by controlled threads of mana. He did not speak immediately. Instead, he extended his will toward Spartan. Without resistance, the undead was drawn back into the damaged coffin of the forgotten. The transfer was smooth and silent, leaving only a faint ripple in the air where he had stood. Michael preferred not to leave his undead exposed when something unknown was interfering with the realm's rules. Only after Spartan was secured did he fully turn his attention to Ariane. How are you? He asked calmly. Ariane stared at him for a moment, as if confirming he was truly there. Her voice faltered slightly before she steadied it. I feel weak, Normal. Her hand instinctively moved to her chest. The strange presence is gone. Michael studied her carefully, extending a thin strand of perception toward her core. Her mana was indeed reduced but stable. The external influence that had once wrapped around her had completely vanished. To be certain, Michael still used his eyes of truth on her. That confirmed it. Good. Michael gave a faint nod. That's expected, he said. The realm lost its owner. The borrowed enhancements are fading. Ariane's gaze shifted to the three figures floating behind him. You found them. They're alive, Michael replied. Just drained. Ariane exhaled softly, tension leaving her shoulders. She hesitated for a moment, then spoke again. Sir Mike, even though the enchantment disappeared, the knowledge I got from the skill orb is still in my mind. Michael's eyes shifted back to her. The knowledge, he repeated. She nodded slowly. That was news to him. Michael had never used the skill orb himself. He had deliberately avoided it, so he had no personal reference for how it functioned once the realm collapsed. His gaze sharpened slightly. You're sure it's still there? Yes. Ariane closed her eyes briefly. I can recall it clearly. The structure of the techniques, the circulation paths, even the theory behind them. Michael fell silent. Then he gave a small nod. That makes sense, he said calmly. Ariane looked at him. The skill orb likely acted as a transmission medium, not the source. Michael explained. The enchantment we felt was probably a temporary amplification, but the knowledge itself was directly imprinted into your consciousness. He paused. When the realm lost its owner, all borrowed energy began to withdraw. But information is different. Once it integrates into your mind, the realm can't reclaim it unless it specifically anchored the knowledge to its own structure. Ariane absorbed his words slowly. So it's mine now? Most likely, Michael replied. He studied her again through eyes of truth, confirming there were no lingering threads or hidden anchors embedded in her mind. Nothing abnormal, just fatigue. That's fortunate, he added. You gain something real from this, at least. Ariane's fingers tightened slightly against her sleeve, emotion flickering briefly in her eyes. But before she could say anything else, the air around them distorted. Again. Sir Mike, should we leave now? Ariane asked softly. Her voice was steady, but her eyes were searching his. I can feel it, she continued. The realm is trying to expel us. She hesitated briefly. I haven't initiated it yet. I was waiting for you. From her words alone, Michael understood. Unlike Ren, she had not attempted to trigger the expulsion. No wonder she asked that question. Chapter 862, A Shady Scheme. After thinking about it for a while, Michael finally spoke. Stop resisting, he said calmly. Try to leave the realm. Ariane did not question him. She did not suspect anything. She assumed it was only a matter of timing. If she left first, she would simply see Michael outside a moment later. All right. Without hesitation, she reached down and drew her tamed beast closer to her side, placing a reassuring hand on its back as she relaxed her resistance and allowed the realm's expulsion force to take hold. The reaction was immediate. Pale light began to gather around her body. Thin threads of distortion formed along the edges of her silhouette as space itself started to pull her away. But what happened next was something Michael had already expected. The light intensified, then it flickered, and stopped. Just like Ren before her, the expulsion collapsed abruptly. The distortion vanished as if it had never existed. Ariane looked around in confusion. Michael, however, was not surprised at all. He had already suspected this would be the case. Something was definitely wrong. But what exactly was happening? Far away from Michael was a group of 10 individuals. It was the group from the Black Serpent Empire. Right now, Prince Rue was looking at the magic circle on the ground before turning to his attendant, the Awakener who had recognized Michael earlier. Do you have any idea what happened? Rue asked calmly. Why is the realm closing before the scheduled time? The attendant lowered his head slightly. We do not know, Your Highness, he replied. But at least we managed to complete our preparations before this began. Prince Rue watched the unstable glow of the magic circle for a moment longer before nodding slowly. Good. His gaze then shifted to the other 8 members of the team standing nearby. They were exhausted, and several of them were still struggling to stabilize their breathing. But despite their condition, all 8 straightened the moment Rue's eyes fell on them. You have all tried your best, Prince Rue said calmly. The Empire will remember your efforts. The words were simple, yet the effect was immediate. The 8 individuals quickly bowed their heads. For the Empire, Your Highness's will is our duty. We only did what we must. Serving the Empire is our honor. Their voices overlapped as they hurriedly declared their loyalty, each trying to speak before the others. Prince Rue observed them quietly as he thought back to the mission his father gave him before he left. Millions of miles away from this constructed realm, the Black Serpent Empire stood as one of the true overlords of the continent. It was not merely large in territory. Its strength came from the terrifying number of great beings it possessed. Even among other empires, the Black Serpent Empire stood firm. Its foundation had been built over thousands of years. However, in recent decades, something subtle had begun to change. The empire still ruled over several kingdoms that acknowledged its authority, but the control it once exercised over the 3 strongest among them was slowly weakening. The reason was simple. Those 3 kingdoms had grown too powerful. Each of them now possessed enough great beings that, under normal circumstances, they could have declared themselves empires in their own right. Among them, the Lionheart Kingdom stood at the very top. Its military power, cultivation resources, and rising young generation had begun attracting attention even from foreign empires. To outsiders, this might have seemed like natural growth. But to the Black Serpent Empire, it was something far more dangerous. No master enjoyed watching their servants grow strong enough to question authority. When the ruins of this constructed realm were first discovered inside Lionheart territory, the Empire immediately realized its potential. If properly explored, it could elevate the Lionheart Kingdom even further. That was unacceptable. Unfortunately, the Empire could not simply seize the ruins by force. Long ago, a former emperor of the Black Serpent Empire had left behind a strict rule that limited imperial intervention in certain external territories. The rule had once been meant to prevent civil wars and reckless expansion. Now it restrained them. Because of that law, the Empire could only pressure the Lionheart Kingdom from the shadows and secure a share of access to the ruins. But in truth, the Empire did not care much about the ruins themselves. What they cared about was control. And that was why Prince Rue had been sent here. His mission was far more subtle. Thanks to the special rules governing this realm, most of the participants were the most talented young individuals of their respective kingdoms, the future pillars, the next generation of commanders, masters, and perhaps even kings. If something unfortunate were to happen to them inside this realm, the consequences would be catastrophic. Most kingdoms would be weakened from within. For an empire seeking to maintain control, it would be a very convenient outcome. Prince Rue's gaze slowly swept across his exhausted companions. Placed in any kingdom, those 8 would have been considered priceless. They were not ordinary elites. There was a reason each of them had been chosen so carefully. And it was not only because they could fight. Each of them was an heir of an important family. For the ritual, a certain level of strength was also required. That was another reason. They stood here now. That was why the 8 were exhausted. That was why their faces looked pale. They had not simply been preparing the circle. They had been feeding it. Prince Rue watched them quietly, calm on the surface, cold beneath. Unfortunately, none of them were going to leave this realm with him. Ironically, it was the same reason the elites of the 3 kingdoms had been sent here. This realm was a perfect knife. If those youths grew stronger, their kingdoms would become harder to control. If they died, their kingdoms would bleed for decades. Chapter 863 Yuga Yuga. Either outcome served the Empire, as long as the Empire remained above them all. And there was a second layer to it which these 8 were related to. Even inside the empire, certain families were rising too quickly. Their influence was spreading. Their great beings were becoming too numerous. They were loyal today, yes, but loyalty weakened when power grew. Prince Rue's gaze lingered on the 8 once more before returning to the magic circle beneath their feet. The formation was no ordinary ritual. It was a summoning circle. It was meant to open a narrow bridge between this unstable realm and the outside world, allowing a powerful figure from the Black Serpent Empire to descend directly into the ruins. Normally, such a thing would have been impossible. Constructed realms had strict rules. Entry and exit were governed by the realm's own structure, and outside interference was heavily suppressed. But this particular circle had been prepared with that limitation in mind. It also did not force the realm open and could interfere with the expulsion process itself. By anchoring a foreign presence into the realm's laws, the formation created turbulence within the exit mechanism. The realm would struggle to eject participants while the summoning process was active. That was why Ren, Arian, Michael, and the others had felt the expulsion begin but could not leave. The realm was trying to purge them, but the summoning circle was disrupting the process. Two rules were colliding with one another. Fortunately for Prince Rue, the most difficult part of the ritual had already been completed before the realm began collapsing earlier than expected. The circle had been fed enough mana. The anchors had been established. Only the final activation remained. Prince Rue studied the unstable glow of the formation. The runes carved into the stone were pulsing faster now, reacting to the increasing instability of the realm. Time was running out. If the realm collapsed fully before the summoning finished, the bridge would tear apart. And that would ruin everything. Prince Rue finally spoke. "Activate it." "Yes, Your Highness." The 8 moved quickly, stepping into their assigned positions along the outer ring of the formation. Each of them placed a hand over the engraved runic lines on the ground. The moment their palms touched the stone, the circle reacted violently. However, before they could continue, a voice echoed from the distance. "What you people doing?" The broken sentence was followed by the appearance of a huge figure. It was Yuga, and he was alone. The reason was simple. The reason Yuga had been convinced to come to these ruins, aside from his sister's words, was because Michael was coming. Unfortunately, the pretty boy did not want to fight him, which made Yuga uninterested in everything else. After he had been assigned to a team, Yuga had actually tried to follow them to satisfy Michael. Unfortunately, their attitude toward him made him angry. He did not want to play with those weaklings who disrespected him and called him names. But because of Michael and his elder sister, he did not do anything. So Yuga left and found a random place to sleep. Occasionally he would wake up and walk around to find either Michael or Ren before falling asleep again because he was bored. It was only when the realm tried to remove him that he became fully active again. Coincidentally, he happened to be not far from Prince Rue and his group. Prince Rue frowned slightly the moment the voice echoed across the cracked ground. His gaze shifted toward the source. A huge figure was approaching slowly, his steps heavy but unhurried. For a brief moment, recognition flickered in Prince Rue's eyes. But the situation did not allow room for curiosity or the entertainment of strangers. The summoning circle had already been activated. Any disturbance now could destabilize the ritual. Prince Rue's expression hardened slightly. He could not afford distractions. Without looking away from the formation for long, he spoke calmly. "Handle him." The order was directed at his attendant, the Awakener who had earlier recognized Michael. The attendant bowed immediately. "Yes, Your Highness." He stepped away from the formation and began walking toward Yuga, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Meanwhile, Yuga had stopped several meters away from the glowing circle. His gaze lingered on the bright runes on the ground. The crimson light reflected in his pupils as he tilted his head slightly. "What this?" His voice sounded genuinely curious. Yuga scratched the side of his head and leaned forward a little, staring at the glowing pattern like a child examining a strange toy. "Why shiny circle on ground?" Before anyone answered, the attendant arrived. Without hesitation, he threw a punch. His fist shot forward with intense speed, mana reinforcing the strike. As it smashed directly toward Yuga's face, the blow landed cleanly. A dull impact echoed across the clearing. Yuga's head tilted slightly from the force. His feet sank half an inch into the cracked ground beneath him. Dust burst outward, but that was all. He did not move, not even a step. The massive youth simply blinked once and slowly straightened his head again. The attendant's eyebrows twitched. Who was this beast? That punch was strong enough to knock down most participants in this realm. Only Michael should be able to counter him so easily. Yet the boy in front of him had not even stumbled. Yuga touched his cheek where the fist had landed, rubbing the spot. Slowly. Then he looked at the attendant. Confusion filled his expression. "Why hit me?" he asked honestly. The attendant did not answer. Instead, his eyes narrowed slightly. If the first punch had been meant as a quick removal, the second was no longer casual. His arm drew back again. This time, mana surged visibly around his fist. The air tightened as the energy condensed, the faint crackle of pressure forming around his knuckles. Then he struck again. The second punch shot forward like a cannon. It carried far more force than the first. The reinforced blow aimed directly at Yuga's jaw with enough power to shatter stone. The impact echoed sharply. Dust exploded outward as the ground beneath Yuga's feet fractured. Further, the cracks spreading like spiderwebs through the dry terrain. For a brief moment, Yuga's head tilted again. His massive body leaned slightly to the side. But again, he did not move. Not a single step. His feet remained planted exactly where they had been. The attendant's pupils shrank. This time, the reaction was impossible to ignore. Yuga slowly turned his head back toward the attendant. Chapter 864 Lack of Advantage? Though staying with people had lessened the bestial instincts in Yuga, unlike when he lived in the wild, there was no way they could disappear completely. Perhaps in the future it might be possible. But that future was not now. After being punched in the face twice despite not doing anything, rage immediately clouded his mind. Yuga's large frame shifted slightly as he planted his feet more firmly into the cracked ground. The earth beneath him groaned faintly from the pressure. The attendant noticed the change immediately. But before he could react, Yuga moved. His fist shot forward. There was no fancy technique. No visible mana surge. Just a simple punch. Yet the moment it left his body, the air in front of it seemed to compress violently. The blow landed squarely on the attendant's chest. The impact sounded like a hammer striking a thick iron plate. For the first time since the fight began, someone moved. The attendant's body slid backward across the ground. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. Dust scraped beneath his boots as he forced himself to stop. His eyes widened slightly. This was the first time someone of the same age group had ever pushed him back in the land of origin. Even those considered geniuses of their generation had never managed it. That was the advantage of Awakeners over normal cultivators. Their classes granted them direct enhancements. As a knight class, the attendant possessed extremely powerful physical strength. His body had been strengthened through awakening far beyond ordinary cultivation. Yet he had just been forced back. Who was this monster? Behind him, Prince Rue had also noticed. His calm expression finally shifted slightly. Unlike many others, Rue was well aware of the attendant's true strength. Normally, Rue would never keep someone of the same generation who was stronger than him close by. But this situation was different. His royal father had personally assigned the youth to him. The official reason was protection. The real reason was observation. According to the emperor, the attendant possessed a great secret, something that might one day benefit even the Black Serpent Empire. So Rue had been told to watch him carefully. And yet this was the first time Rue had seen the attendant pushed back by someone of the same generation. Awakeners were special beings. Their classes granted them abilities and advantages that ordinary cultivators could not easily replicate. But special did not mean invincible. The gap between individuals still existed. Against certain existences, the field could become surprisingly even. Not all Awakeners were abnormal monsters like Michael. Most still had limits. Yuga was simply one of those exceptions that refused to fit neatly within the expected boundaries of power. Months ago, when both he and Michael had stood at the peak of rank 1, Yuga had been able to match Michael in terms of raw physical strength alone. At that time, Michael was already a high human. If Yuga could stand on equal footing with such a being at that stage, and had since advanced further with more of his natural prowess surfacing, then the implications were obvious. Even if the current Yuga could no longer compete with Michael, that did not mean he had suddenly become ordinary. Far from it. Among the Awakeners who currently stood in Aurora, very few of Michael's generation could handle someone like Yuga easily. The attendant steadied himself. Yuga stood a few meters away, shoulders rising and falling, his eyes fixed on the man who had just hit him twice for no reason. The anger in his expression sharpened into something more focused. The attendant shifted his stance, this time raising both hands. He stepped forward. Yuga stepped forward as well. Their movements collided. The attendant's fist snapped out, fast and clean, carrying a sharp burst of mana that cracked the air. Yuga swayed his head a fraction, the blow grazing past his cheek instead of landing squarely. Yuga answered with another punch. It was still simple, still direct, but the moment it moved, the space in front of it seemed to compress. Again, the attendant blocked with his forearm. The impact rattled through his bones and forced him back half a step. Yuga followed. A second punch came immediately, then a third, each one heavier than the last. The attendant retreated in short bursts, blocking, shifting, and parrying with skill, trying to break the rhythm. The attendant slipped to the side and drove a kick toward Yuga's knee, aiming to disrupt his base. The kick struck, but it felt like hitting a stone pillar. Yuga's leg did not buckle. Instead, Yuga's arm swung across like a club. The attendant leaned back just in time, the wind from the strike ripping dust off the ground as it passed. Behind them, the summoning circle pulsed brighter. The 8 continued feeding it, but their faces tightened. Their breathing became uneven. Prince Rue's eyes narrowed. He watched the fight for a single breath longer, then his voice cut through the tension. "Take it elsewhere." The attendant's expression tightened. He understood immediately. If this continued beside the formation, the turbulence would grow. If the circle destabilized at the final stage, everything would collapse. The bridge would tear. The price they had already paid would become meaningless. He stepped back again, calculating. Yuga moved to follow, feet cracking the earth with every step. The attendant's hand dropped to his waist. Metal rang softly. A sword slid free from its sheath. The blade caught the crimson glow of the runes and reflected it in a cold line along its edge. The moment the weapon appeared, the air around the attendant changed. His posture lowered. His breathing steadied. His mana gathered differently, no longer reinforcing just his fists and body, but flowing into the weapon like a second nervous system. Yuga paused for a brief moment. His eyes locked onto the sword. Then he stepped forward anyway. The attendant shifted sideways, drawing Yuga's advance away from the formation. His feet moved in controlled patterns, each step light despite the cracked ground, guiding the battle outward. Chapter 865 gained advantage. Yuga followed like a charging beast. The attendant's blade flashed. A clean horizontal slash cut across the space between them. The edge carried mana, turning a simple swing into a sharp pressure wave. Yuga raised his forearm. The pressure wave struck and burst apart, scattering dust and fragments of stone, but it still pushed him back a fraction. That fraction was enough. The attendant used it, stepping in and turning his blade, slashing again and then again. Each strike was precise, each one controlling where Yuga could move. Yuga swung his fist through the gaps, trying to break through the line of steel. The sword met his arm. The blade did not cut deeply, but it left a thin red line on his skin. For the first time, blood appeared. Yuga's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Then his face twisted. He surged forward again, faster now, anger and instinct driving him as he chased the attendant farther and farther from the summoning circle. Prince Rue watched them go, his expression settling back into calm. The summoning circle continued to pulse. The 8 kept feeding it, their hands trembling, their bodies nearing the limit. Prince Rue did not look in the direction of the battle again. His attention returned fully to the formation. The summoning circle pulsed beneath the 8 participants, its runic lines glowing brighter with every passing second. The crimson light spread across the cracked ground like veins, carrying the mana they were pouring into it. The reaction was becoming violent. The runes trembled. Small sparks of unstable energy snapped across the circle, stinging the hands pressed against the stone. One of the 8 nearly flinched, but he did not pull away. None of them did. Their faces had begun to change. The earlier exhaustion had not disappeared, but something else had joined it now. Dread. They could feel it clearly. Something was wrong. The formation was pulling far more mana than it had before. The flow had become heavy, almost greedy, dragging energy from their cores with a force that made their meridians ache. Several of them had already realized it, but none of them dared to stop. Their instincts screamed the same warning. Stopping now would be worse. The formation had already been activated. The ritual had passed the point where interruption was safe. Breaking the flow abruptly could cause backlash, tearing their mana channels apart or triggering the collapse of the entire formation. So they endured. Their breathing grew rougher. Sweat formed along their temples despite the cold air. Prince Rue watched them quietly. His face remained completely flat. There was no tension in his posture, no sign of concern in his eyes. After a moment he spoke. "You are doing well. Continue." His tone was calm, encouraging, but it carried no warmth. The words did not ease the pressure weighing on the 8. If anything, the dread inside their chests deepened. They could feel it now. The mana they were feeding into the circle was not stabilizing the formation as expected. It was being consumed. The runes were drinking it. One of the 8 lifted his eyes slightly. Then another. Soon several of them were glancing toward Prince Rue. The looks were brief, quiet, but they were filled with the same silent question. Prince Rue noticed. Of course he noticed. Yet he ignored them completely. His gaze remained fixed on the formation as if nothing unusual was happening. The silence among them pleased him. No one spoke. No one protested. No one dared to question him. Despite the growing dread, their hands remained pressed firmly against the stone, their mana continuing to pour into the circle exactly as they had been ordered. Prince Rue watched the glowing runes pulse faster and faster. Far from the formation, the battle between Yuga and the attendant continued to intensify. The ground beneath them was already scarred with cracks and gouges from their earlier exchanges. Dust drifted lazily through the air only to be torn apart whenever the 2 figures collided again. Yuga lunged forward. His movements were still raw and direct. Each step shattered stone beneath his feet as he closed the distance with the simple intention of crushing the man in front of him. The attendant no longer attempted to meet those blows head-on. Steel flashed. The sword moved in clean arcs, cutting through the air with controlled precision. The blade intercepted Yuga's next punch, sliding across the youth's knuckles and forcing the strike slightly off course. Yuga's fist still carried enormous force. Even deflected, the blow slammed into the ground behind the attendant and blasted a crater into the stone. The attendant had already moved. His feet shifted in quick steps as he circled around Yuga's flank. The sword snapped forward again, this time thrusting toward the giant youth's ribs. Yuga twisted. The blade scraped across his side instead of piercing deeply, leaving another thin red line across his skin. Yuga swung his arm in response, trying to grab the attacker outright. The attendant retreated just in time. The hand closed on empty air. Their difference in fighting style had become clear. Yuga relied on overwhelming physical strength. Every strike carried enough force to crush bone and break armor, but his movements were broad and instinctive. The attendant fought differently. His strikes were measured, controlled, and aimed not at overpowering Yuga but at exploiting the smallest openings. Another exchange erupted. Yuga drove forward with a heavy punch. The attendant stepped aside and cut downward. The blade struck Yuga's shoulder, carving a shallow wound before, sliding away as the youth's other arm swung around in retaliation. Yuga's fist clipped the attendant's side. The impact was glancing, but it still pushed him several steps back. The attendant recovered quickly. His breathing had become more focused now. The longer the battle continued, the clearer the pattern became. Yuga's body was monstrously strong, but his attacks lacked refinement. Awakeners also had certain advantages, even if those advantages were sometimes small. Steel flashed again. Another cut appeared across Yuga's forearm, then another across his shoulder. The wounds were not deep, but they were increasing. Yuga roared in frustration and surged forward again, smashing his fist toward the attendant's chest. This time the sword met the strike directly. The blade turned sideways, redirecting the force while the attendant's body shifted along with the impact. The moment Yuga's momentum carried him forward, the attendant moved. His sword struck again. A precise slash opened a deeper line across Yuga's upper arm. For the first time, blood splashed onto the cracked ground.